I'm like, hey,
How many checks you get? So they didn't even do the second.
yeah.
Did you bust him on that, on why he didn't want to when I saw him at CML? And I go, how come you're not going to go back to...
It looks like this urban renewal gig is pretty fruitful for you over there. What?
It's immediately
Good
why I
evening.
asked whether Brad was
Welcome
making
to this evening's study session. I call this meeting to order.
He pays for lunch next time.
First item on the agenda is the monthly financial review for January 2018. Finance and Administrative Services Director Kathleen Rinkel is present to review the January 2018 financial report. Good evening.
Good evening. So we have, I guess, some strong news. I'm not going to call it exciting yet because we're in January. So it's real similar to where we started last year. We have revenues exceeding expenditures by about $1.7 million. We have the revenues about $173,000 higher than last year at this time, but the expenses are likewise about $102,000 higher than it is at last time. So that's basically the quick overview. We have the abbreviated package in front of us, and what I'd like to point out is on page 3, where we look at the individual revenues and the individual expenditures. Our revenues are at this point are sitting at 10.5% received, when we're only 8.3% through the year. So that's a good position. And likewise with the expenses, we're at 6.8% at 8.3% through the year. I would say those are the highlights. A lot of the rest of the information in the packet is similar to what you saw. In fact, some of it's even the same as what you saw in the preliminary December packet. So with that, I can be short and sweet unless we've got some questions.
I actually have one question, and
Okay.
it goes back to what I asked the last time about the ladder fund. It shows on page 5 that in 2017 it was $3,384,897, and it increased to the year-end estimate at $4,827,099. Why does that change?
Those are the rents that we're getting from the EMERV.
Oh, so that's where they go. Okay. Are there any other questions?
Yes.
Councilmember Cuesta.
In the same way a UFO enthusiast would be fascinated by Area 51, I am fascinated by Area 7. Every time I see this, I just cannot figure out how it does so well. So if we look at Area 7, and it is page 7.
Page 7 with all the pretty colors.
So even using that light green line for 2018 in Area 7, we've already collected 1.55?
About that, yes. For January. It's our largest area, and we're working to break it down, putting some processes in place where we can break it down between internet sales and all the other sales. So, so that hopefully will help explain some of it.
Sure.
I do know that it's not huge at this point, so we'll probably have to find a way to break some of the other stuff down for you so you can see it.
The internet sales not being a huge component of the 1.55.
Yes.
Thank you. It catches my eye, every one of these reports. And I look forward to seeing more of what comprises those numbers. But thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Wink.
Thank you. Kathleen, might you have any information currently about, updated information about the special election?
The special election, in terms of costs, no, I have not been involved with that at all.
Any of that? Okay.
Councilmember Barentine.
Does this increase the amount since outside sales, we hold a percentage or we hold a stagnant dollar amount? We don't
Yes,
hold a percentage,
I think
we
it's
just hold
noted
an
in here.
amount, don't we?
Right, we hold an amount that's approximately 3 years' worth of what we believe would be allocated to one of the other areas.
So how are you identifying then that they're internet?
That they're internet sales?
Just, yeah.
We're working on MuniRevs at this point to have them register as a separate area for internet sales rather than throwing it all together in Area 7. And so going forward, they'll be reporting in those segments. We'll be able to provide
Because
that
the
for
problem before with all of holding it for 3 years has always been that we couldn't really say whether it was for sure or not that it was ours, but we were waiting for somebody to come and
that's-
make a claim on it, and I want to know if the process that you're doing is going to be a little bit more precise that it's ours, then why would we still want to list it as outside sales? I mean, if we can break it down to where we can categorize it and we know for sure it's ours, then it should come out of that category.
That's why we'll have a separate category for it, and a separate area. So it won't be Area 7 anymore. That piece will be Area
So how
9
many-
or 10.
So you're going to come to us and let us know what process you're using so that because obviously
Right.
we don't want to commit to money and then have
Right.
somebody come and say it's really theirs. So if you have a process, though, to make sure that it's committed, I do agree it should come out of that.
Right, absolutely. And that could adjust our estimate as well going forward, once we identify what the internet sales are, because those would truly be ours.
Or we should start holding more in reserve. Because if we can't identify that this is truly safe money, then maybe we should hold more in reserve, because it's a pretty large amount.
We've never had anyone request, at least in the 2 years that I've been here, anyone request any funding out of that reserve. So at this
Haven't
point,
had
nobody's
any?
challenged us.
Not since I've been here. Yeah, however,
Because we had some pretty major ones before.
Greenwood Village and Centennial.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you can identify them, that would be awesome to have it come out of that
Yes.
area because of the restrictions that are on there. But if we can't, that's a little concerning that we're only holding, how much in that account?
$1.5 million.
I wanted to say 1.8
You know,
million.
the
It's
little
close,
tall
yeah.
part goes to
Yeah. Yeah.
7.
Right.
It's not good. So let me know what process you're using for that, because that'd be awesome to get some of
Okay.
that out of there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Glad you asked, Dave.
Councilmember Olson.
So, Manager Keck, those two cities actually came up with a better system to keep track of things, I think, didn't they? So
Yeah, there's a couple things that have happened. I
Yeah.
think the last time that we had to make a payment was 2014 to both of those communities. Since then, there's now the streamlined sales tax definitions data that they've adopted. We haven't adopted them yet. You will see that come forward later this year. That helps. And exactly the system, they changed their systems. In one case, I think Greenwood Village changed their, no, it was Centennial changed their software too, to be a little bit better on tracking that.
tighter. So
Yeah.
it's a
And
little-
hired
yeah.
more auditors.
They have a lot of auditors there.
Yeah, and they got
So
more people
it
doing
seems
the
to
job.
me that the last 3 to 4 years, they've gotten that kink figured out because they were leaving money on the table, and they're not anymore.
Right.
Sometimes I've heard them say, we're not leaving any for you anymore.
The-
So, which
the
is
last
good.
audit
They should
request-
be getting it.
Yeah, the last audit request we did have was from Cherry Hills Village. When Mayor Chrisman came into office, she was concerned that our sales tax was their sales tax, and we went through that process and determined that it wasn't. So
Yeah.
Well, if it doesn't belong there, but we need something really solid, because that's, if
Yes.
somebody else comes and says it's theirs, we're in a lot of trouble.
Well-
So as long as we can, let's take it out.
yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think the other concern that we all need to be keeping an eye on is legislation this year that again has been put forward by the Department of Revenue, where they want to collect sales tax for every jurisdiction in the state and then give it back to the cities. If that were the case, we could see some further turbulence in that sales tax
no.
area. Yeah,
No, I don't want, legislators and a pile of money don't go well together.
I hear you. Well, my concern is they would
track
live
those,
off of
sure.
it and just float off our interest and then just give it to us in little pieces. So.
No.
Okay. Any further questions? All right. Thank you very much. It's always good news when we're in good shape.
Absolutely.
Our next agenda item is council strategy session. Assistant City Manager Mark Woulf is here to discuss themes and goals for the community workshop and the timeline for the strategic plan adoption. Good evening, Mr. Woulf, and
Evening.
I just want to say that our thoughts and prayers have been with you.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's support and well wishes over the last week. It was definitely tough for my family and myself, but appreciate the support amongst this body and certainly with our coworkers. So it's been nice to have that support.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have you back, and I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, let's talk some strategy. So there's a number of slides. I hope everybody had a chance to review the information that I provided. Hopefully more tonight, if nothing else, to get conversation going. So if at any point you want to interject or offer any thoughts on anything in the presentation, feel free. It is intended to spark discussion amongst this group. So we'll just dive right into it, and I'll try to get through this and leave as much time for discussion as possible. Agenda for this evening, we'll talk about what we're trying to get out of tonight, knowing we have a limited amount of time. Wanted to talk a little bit about why you do a strategic plan, just to refresh our memory from a few months ago when we started this conversation. A couple examples I included. Hopefully you were able to open the links to those specific strategic plans from other cities. There's certainly other examples, but those I thought were interesting to what we were trying to do. A review of the quote interview. I used quotations, essentially the 7 questions that I asked each of you that you responded to. And we'll go through those, are 8 questions. And then discussion of our community workshops coming up. I should say your community workshops coming up in March. And then a review of the timeline and next steps. So starting with our goals for this evening. Ideally, we'd identify some initial themes or goals for a strategic plan. Identify goals and a format for the community workshops coming up on the 7th and the 15th of March. And consensus on the timeline and next steps. So if we can get those 3 things out of tonight, that would be awesome. So backing up a little bit, why a strategic plan? Well, basically it's to reflect the goals and the priorities of the community. That's why we have a strategic plan. They are big picture ideas, ideally that you all carry forward as elected officials in a reflection of what you're hearing from the community, and in this process going forward, what we gather along the way to especially as the community reacts to what we've come up with so far. It's a blueprint for staff to follow. This is for our biggest policy document, being this annual city budget, but also daily operations. So I'll talk a lot tonight about the cascading effect of a strategic plan. So if you have a big picture goal that's identified, a community-wide goal, and then you have objectives, and they are, again, they're broad, but a little bit more specific than that overall goal, that might be the piece that is council adopted, if you will, or have significant community involvement. Past that, how we support those objectives and goals on a daily basis is really how the city manager and the rest of our staff follow the goals that the council and the community set. So that blueprint, that cascading effect is one major aspect of why there's a strategic plan. And 2 other things I decided to highlight. One is transparency for the community, saying this is what our targets are. So there's no confusion when something might come up that is controversial and naturally will solicit some type of community reaction that we say, well, this is really in line with this particular goal. And then predictability, and this is especially from a business standpoint, that if we're out there as a community saying these 5 things are really important to us, or we're going to follow these few aspects of our comprehensive plan, then I know if I'm investing in Englewood that there's some type of predictability going forward. So some examples from other cities. I think a few elements are important to what we're trying to do here. One is that strategic plans tend to be council adopted. Some of them start as staff led. We have an organizational plan that I've attached in the materials that you've seen many times. But to have a strategic plan, I think it's important that the council adopts it. That there's community involvement in creating that plan, and there's some type of way to track progress towards the goals. So specifically, looking at a few examples, Fort Collins, and we've talked about Fort Collins before. One thing I really like, and I know it's not possible to implement this procedure exactly because of the way our charter outlines our budget process, they alternate years for their strategic plan and their budget. So they work 1 year on their strategic plan, refine it, go to the community, update it as they see fit based on the metrics they have in the plan, and the alternating year they do a 2-year budget. And so while we can't do that specifically, I like the concept of having a plan that we work on every 2 years that directly relates to our 2-year funding plan, and especially that year's budget. Fort Collins happens to be an example that's extremely detailed and specific. Don't be concerned. They have 10 years head start on us in this way, so they've built that over time. But what I really like about their plan is that there's metrics to track progress. So you can see they show you red, yellow, green, how well they're doing in each area of the plan and how well they're hitting their objectives. And their strategic plan is directly integrated into the budget process. And this year, and you'll hear a lot more about this going forward, from a staff level, what we're doing in trying to orient ourselves internally to develop a better process internally for the budget, we're trying to emulate some of the things coming out of Fort Collins that aligns directly with their strategic plan. Colorado Springs, they're a little bit more ambitious in terms of the time. They look at a 5-year strategic plan. The goals and objectives are created by council. So they create these 4 buckets. It's simple. They say, here's 4 areas that we say are important. Here's some specific objectives that as a council we're agreeing to are our initiatives or our priorities. And then the initiatives are created by staff to try to hit those objectives and goals. And then staff checks in quarterly with the council on progress. And lastly, the one I flagged was Westminster. They've done a lot of visioning activities with the community to develop their goals. It's updated every year. They do prioritization within their goals, so they actually set a goal and then maybe 10 objectives underneath that goal. This is how we're going to reach that goal. And then they bold-face a few of those objectives to say, as a council, we agree that this year these 3 things are the most important that staff should work on. And twice a year, staff reports progress. So again, a few items that I wanted to point out in these examples. The goals are actionable, either themselves. The goals themselves are the objectives that support them. So that's helpful when, as staff, we're trying to carry out the vision of council. We know what we're supposed to be doing. And the goals are measurable. So there's some type of metric or mechanism that we can track progress, which is important not just for ourselves to understand how we're doing, but so that the community holds us accountable when we say we're going to do something. And again, the strategic plan is directly linked to these budget processes, which again comes back to daily operations. So that idea of alignment is really important and powerful in this.
Is the strategic plan aligned with the budget?
In these cases, yes. You goading me? Yes. Yes, I'll say that a lot. Good. All right, so any questions about kind of those that lead in, what we're doing, what some of those other cities' examples are before we dive into our review of the themes? Okay. So a reminder, this was attached to the materials today, so mostly for the community. You all remember the questions. Asked you about opportunities for the city of Englewood over the next 2 to 3 years. As a city and organization, what are our strengths? Again, as a city and or organization, what are our biggest weaknesses? What are our challenges to achieving our 8 community goals that we have established right now? What are our largest threats to Englewood? And that's very broad, looking at economic or natural environment, et cetera. Turn a little bit towards projects, analyzing the 5-year capital improvement plan. Are there projects missing, or does there need to be a reprioritization? If you had to choose 2 themes for 2018, what would they be and why? And at the end of 2019, if we had a State of the City address, which I'm not speculating, just hypothetically speaking, what would you hope to say was accomplished over the last 2 years? And so ground rules for how I'm reporting this out, just so I'm transparent in how I've tried to capture this. Nothing's attributed to one person. I tried to capture themes. So if it's a theme, that means that it's repeated at some point. Now, given it's a small group, there's only 6 of you. If it was said twice, I counted that as a theme, so it's included in here. If only one council member mentioned it, I tried not to include it in this review. Not to say that it's not important, and if you want to raise it, of course, feel free for the discussion to raise it as a point that's missing. But I tried to capture those themes that had some commonality amongst the group here. I've divided it into a SWOT, so those familiar strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So I combined one of the questions to capture our weaknesses in two different ways, kind of looking at organizationally weaknesses and citywide a little bit broader, or captured in the same weaknesses category. And then projects, themes, and the hypothetical reflections on the 2 years to come are next. And finally, I've offered some suggestions on the themes to extrapolate out of the SWOT analysis that hopefully at least spark some discussion tonight. Okay, starting with strengths. Themes, residents, the citizens of Englewood, that they're engaged, that we have an engaged populace. So that was a strength pointed out. The history, we've talked a lot about that at these meetings. We have a banner that talks about our history on Broadway, so certainly the history was something that most of you, if not all of you, pointed out. A small town feel to Englewood despite our proximity to Denver, our parks, our staff and employees, and that generally we're going in a positive direction. Weaknesses and challenges. A few of you pointed out a lack of direction from council, this idea of more transactional versus strategic direction. Lack of prioritization came up quite a bit. Capital projects funding, there was concerns over. Lack of long-term financial plan related, though broader than just capital projects. Meaningful community engagement. So while there's some engagement activities, we've ramped that up, especially over the past year, to make sure that there's meaning behind that engagement, and certain departmental processes and services. So there wasn't consensus on which departmental processes, but certainly various ones were pointed out at different times. Opportunities for the community. Less consensus in this area, as you might imagine, but a few commonalities. Redevelopment, broadly speaking. That could be redevelopment around here. That could be redevelopment along Broadway. That could be the former Kmart site. Continuing to attract young families. A number of you mentioned how valuable that is to us, that we continue to attract young families. So whatever that is, figuring out a way to continue that into the future. Financial sustainability, that we have an opportunity with this plan going forward to create a better financial position for us going forward, and that we have the opportunity to improve customer service and instill public trust overall. Some threats to achieving community goals, unbalanced, unsustainable growth. Again, I think as you all are well aware, there's some difference of opinion on what unsustainable growth means to this body, but I think everybody had growth on their minds as a threat if it's not done in the right way, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The housing market, affordability, related cost of living, and then some type of major interruption, whether that's climate-based, cyber, it could be economic interruption. Capital projects, there wasn't one project that everybody, as you might know from your list and your next agenda item, that at least in my questions that came out, I think the only common theme that I wanted to point out was that, well, we really need to stick to our 5-year capital improvement plan. And if we agree on a 5-year capital improvement plan and update it every year, that should be our guiding document for capital projects and for prioritizing capital projects. Some of your themes for 2018, perhaps, that you had some consensus on. This idea of the Englewood Renaissance came up quite a bit that I thought was a nice thought, which is to say we've made a lot of progress, and it seems like we're really putting Englewood on the map. So let's continue that Renaissance in whatever way possible. Smart growth. I use the term smart. It came up in different ways, so I won't say everybody said smart growth when we talked about growth, but something about how we're moving forward, especially related to our comprehensive plan. Budget prioritization, capital funding, effective management, and charter mandated services. And lastly, looking if it's January 2020, what have we accomplished? A few commonalities here. Increased revenue, budget sustainability. There's been investment in infrastructure and parks. Smart growth, again, using that term loosely. And the Broadway boom has continued and spread to other areas. That was another theme that came out of the hypothetical reflection. And I did steal one quote. I won't attribute it, but I thought this captured it really well, is that staff and council are cohesively working towards the vision of the city. So we certainly hope that, too, at the end of this process, that if we look 2 years later, look back at the work we've done together on a strategic plan, that we said, hey, we've worked together on this, and we've really moved the city forward. A few other takeaways. I think there was consensus that some type of prioritization needs to happen, that we have these goals, these community goals and definitions that capture everything we do, and we use that as our guiding document. But that being said, especially when either there's additional funding or lack of funding, we need to prioritize whether it's projects or services in some way. Related to that, financial planning is critical, especially capital planning, and growth management. I mean, if I had to try to capture a few major things that everybody said, it was some touching on these three things in some way. And I think related, and I know I put this in the council communication, some type of process for implementing your comprehensive plan. And I think the session that you all had a few weeks ago was really positive, where there was a dialogue on here's what's in the comprehensive plan, here's where we're at today, here's some thoughts from various council members on how to move forward, and some degree of consensus on here's one or two things to at least move the ball forward on the plan. I think we'll get into this in a little bit more detail. But your growth management plan is your comprehensive plan. It's really just a matter of agreeing amongst this body how you will implement that comprehensive plan, or what elements of that comprehensive plan are most important. All right. Any thoughts on kind of the themes, anything missing that you said that you wanted to make sure is a part of the conversation before we jump into some potential themes or goals moving forward? Okay, quiet bunch tonight. All right, so I just wanted to caveat this. I've called them potential goals or themes. So if they're goals as a part of the strategic plan, at least in my mind, they're formal goals that would be kind of your big picture. Then you'd have your next layer down, which are the objectives, and then we'd have the responsibility of aligning our organizational plan to those goals and objectives. And so I think the goals to me are a little bit more formal, that if we actually move forward to the point of adopting a strategic plan, then these are potential goals that would be in that plan. You could also do something, what I'd say, lighter or less formal, which would be themes. And so similar to what we've done at the organizational level, at looking at our, quote, Englewood 5, where we just identified 5 really important things that we wanted to get done in 2017 and 2018. We had a different 5 for each year. So you could organize this in different ways. You'd keep your base 8 goals, and you're essentially just reprioritizing a bit. So you could do that either way, and that's certainly up for discussion. But I tried to leave this, I've tried to guide this conversation as best I can based on what you've told me, but I'm not prescribing how you should frame this to the community going forward. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So what I've suggested in these next slides are essentially based on the commonality that was there, 5 areas where I thought there could be themes or goals for this body as a whole. And certainly it's not, everything's not in there. It's not everything in the kitchen sink like our current goals are. So I've tried to put them in buckets that are a little bit more meaningful and specific, and so certainly they're missing elements. And so I'll throw these up, talk through them, and hopefully there's some dialogue after that. So starting with fiscal sustainability or sound financial planning, This would include making sure there's a balanced budget, there's a revenue plan, there's a 5-year capital improvement plan, and there's strategies to maintain affordability. So again, these are, each bullet point in this I took from something that was said throughout these interviews. So these aren't my ideas, these are yours, and trying to categorize them into these goals or themes. So definitely fiscal sustainability in some way. Struggled with figuring out how to term this one, but embrace our history and renaissance, or celebrate and protect our past, present, and future, or historic past, smart future. Again, this is deciding on what the priorities of this body are with the comp plan. Historic preservation, innovation in some way, if you look at, if you're more future-oriented, maybe sustainability or resiliency as a part of this. This could be very broad. So I think as you think through these goals or themes, again, that cascading, what's going to be most important for the adoption of the strategic plan down the road is to agree on what those objectives are to support these goals. That'll give us the direction. But step one is to just kind of agree on those bigger buckets. Next, looking at reliable infrastructure. Reliable infrastructure and vibrant community amenities, or strong infrastructure in community parks, or placemaking and infrastructure investment, depending on what objectives meet those goals. This is definitely getting at some of your the deferred maintenance, looking at the capital improvement plan. Again, some type of prioritization of your existing Parks and Rec master plan. So really getting at the idea of your community amenities, your parks, your infrastructure. And then safe, engaged, and connected, family-friendly community, or safe, fun, active, and engaged community. Here's your policing activities, community policing, your community events, or community engagement activities, marketing efforts. Placemaking could fit here, if not in another category. And lastly, getting at some of the more inward organizational focus, organizational excellence, or employer of choice. You've heard our HR director, Maria Gonzalez, talk about this. Excellence in customer service could go in a number of different ways there, but would include things like continuous improvement, process improvement internally, looking at more business-friendly systems and services, or ensuring the ones we have are adequate. And then from a staff perspective, talent attraction and retention. So those are the 5 buckets. I mean, some others that I did not include as a specific theme, but we're certainly, you can make an argument, we're there. Sustainability in some way, especially with the natural environment. Connections to the business community, again, not called out specifically here, could be a subcategory of one of these. Transportation is one that's not touched necessarily in here, although it is covered in your comprehensive plan. Innovation, again, a broad word that would need more specifics. So I think at this point it'd be good to perhaps get some reactions to the themes before we kind of dive in and get into what the community workshops might look like. They're obviously both very related, but maybe it's a good stopping point to get some input.
Councilmember Wink.
Thanks for all this work, Mark. I can imagine what the notes from all your sessions with all of us looked like before you started this project. I see what you mean in terms of the 4 bullets you have under others here at the end. And as you sort of mentioned at the very end, I don't know that we need to necessarily call them out so explicitly here, because they are in the comprehensive plan, and because prioritization and working through our comprehensive plan is a focus of all of this work, or is included in this work. So I do like the fact that you have innovation and the sustainability piece, which certain parts of it's something that gets left off or comes in last place sometimes, but you do have those bullets under the past, present, smart future piece. So I like that inclusion there. I mean, there's quite a bit dedicated to transportation in the comp plan for sure, as well as the business community. I mean, my colleagues will have other input, but I love this. I think it's really well put together. I feel like we could work from this and really start moving forward based on these categorizations. My 2 cents.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other feedback? Councilmember Martinez.
I want to say thanks again for all the work that you've done on this. I'm sure it was not easy. So I like how you've categorized them as well. I don't know if we're looking for feedback on each of them or all of them or.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think foreshadowing our discussion about the community sessions, I think there needs to be some consensus tonight of what to bring the community in those sessions. And so, I personally, I think it'd be great to show them a concept of, whether it be 4 or 5 or 6 different themes, to say, here's what we're generally thinking. This is our first crack at it. Each of us has talked about this, maybe in a bit different way, but now we're asking the community, what do these categories or goals or themes mean to you, and or how would you pursue them? And we can talk through a little bit about that. So if you want to move forward in that way, some comments on changing the wording or making sure an item is included as under the umbrella under one of these goals or themes would be helpful. Certainly there's other ways we could structure the community sessions. And so I think that was part of the discussion tonight, is to gauge, is it close enough where we can show the community something that this body's created, or do we have to walk that back a bit and show them kind of, here's our current goals, and tee it up in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I really like everything you've put together here. I gravitate the strongest to the historic past, smart future. To kind of echo what Councilmember Wink said about those, I really like that, innovation and sustainability and resiliency are in there, and I think those can encompass a lot of other parts of the other themes as well. I also really like the safe, fun, active, and engaged community, or safe, engaged, connected, family-friendly community. I gravitate towards those two, but I really do think all of them are important and would be in favor, actually, of each of them.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
I greatly appreciate the work that you did. I had a very nice time meeting with you and going over with this. I don't think you could have said it better. Echoes exactly what I thought that this process was going to be. I don't want to go into the community meetings telling people what we've already decided, but saying, hey, we were part of the process to begin with. This is kind of where this is melding into, so that they have all of this piece to kind of draw from, and then seeing where they come from it too, so that we're kind of having some equal footing. I think the problems in the past have been too much of a feel for the community of believing that we're just deciding and then coming to them for some rubber stamp. And so exactly what you said, the idea that you had about kind of moving this forward was well spoken, and I agree wholeheartedly with that. I like the way that you took the information and put it together. And I would really like to see the feedback from the community on what you've done with what their representatives have brought to the table. Mm-hmm. I think that would be very beneficial for all of us, so that we're kind of listening and seeing what the take is from them as well. But yeah, well spoken. I would, exactly what you said, that's what I would like to see these community meetings be done as. And I think you did a really beautiful job of putting this piece together without it coming too heavy-handed one way or the other, so that the idea is there, and I think we can get some really good feedback from people on this. I think it's a project worthwhile doing now. I have to admit, I was a little skeptical at first, and I really have enjoyed how this is coming together, and I can really see how the community can feel a part of this. So I don't want to be too heavy-handed tonight on it, because I think that kind of ends up, we miss the piece from them then.
Right.
And then what's the point of having it? If we're already going to decide then what we're having community meetings for is to sell it. And that's not what I thought it was for.
Right.
So I really appreciate the work you've done, and I'm really very happy with the direction this is taking. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know, I know I was a hard sell on it, but I like the way this is coming together. I really do. I really do.
Good.
I mean that sincerely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. And agreed. Thank you for all the effort that's gone into this, Mark. There's certainly some of these that jump out at me more than others, and I would imagine that's the case with everybody at the table. I like your approach, actionable and measurable, and I think some of these lend themselves to that a little better than others, just in terms of just flat out quantifying, we hit that or we did not. For instance, fiscal sustainability, balanced budget, revenue plan, et cetera, those ones we could pretty easily black and white, no, we hit that metric or we did not. A few of the others, I do think it gets a bit more subjective, qualitative, which isn't to say they shouldn't be regarded or considered. I agree. I'm kind of wondering, I mean, again, there's a few of these that I think are just really a heavy focus for myself. Sometimes I wonder what the citizens are going to say. Are they going to say, Council, you got this all wrong and you guys don't know what you're talking about, or are we going to get good buy-in from them? So if I'm understanding correctly, as it stands now, we would go to these meetings in March with these 5 themes unless we decide to change them this evening?
Right, exactly. So if there were to be consensus on taking these 5 forward, ideally, unless there's strong preference, we can just kind of take an example from, since I've given you the oars in each of the goals, and just say, here's our first crack at it. We haven't decided anything, and structure the evening in some way where they could participate in some visioning and say, this is what this category means to me, or, hey, Council, you're missing blank, this is what you're missing and why, and try to capture that at those 2 sessions. Now, that's only going to be a small percentage of the community, obviously, 2 sessions. We do have the community survey that's out there. Granted, it's not aimed specifically at this plan, but it will give you some input into what the community pulse is, both from a scientific perspective, and then we've opened that up for the rest of the community as well. So hopefully between the 2, you'd have a nice, fairly robust on a short time frame community input on these goals, and take that into consideration moving forward.
Okay. And I appreciate that we have the micro goals for tonight. Looking down the road a little bit, we'll have our community meetings, we'll have the survey out. We will then take back all the information we've collected through those. Council will meet one more time, and then we'll begin to make a final determination on how we want to set this.
So maybe I'll walk through these last few slides, because it outlines
If I'm
some
getting
of
ahead,
that.
then how about this? Let me wrap up mine, and then you can
Please.
dig into those slides. I think that there's some great ones here. To me, a goal is more measurable, too. A theme is like you hit it or not, and it just rolls on, where a goal you miss. Either you get it or you don't.
Right.
So I do like the notion of goals more than themes. Truth be told, I think it pulls us to a harder line and feet to the fire. And if we're going to set goals and things we want to do, we should really try and achieve those. And I, too, am looking forward to see what the input is on these from the neighbors and what the community has to say. But again, I know a tremendous amount of effort went into this, so I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Olson.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you. I agree. I'm a goals person too. However, I'm really in favor of what I think a number of us have suggested, including Councilmember Barentine just now, of leaving this broad enough. So maybe continuing to call these themes until we're really clear on what the themes are, and then coming up with really actionable, smart goals under each of them. And I was trying to figure out. I've been kind of mulling over these 5 categories. It seems to me it captures a lot. I went back and looked over what I said to you and what I wrote, and captures most everything that I really would love to see in different kinds of language and ways. And so there's 5 of them. And I tried to give like a 1-word or 2-word to see, does this really, are they commensurate? Are they distinct enough so that they're not overlapping one another? Because I was concerned that the first and the third overlapped quite a bit with budget and so forth. But really, the first one's this fiscal sustainability, either one. The second one really is this balance of history and future and where growth goes. And the third one is about infrastructure, which does have budget, but you got to look at infrastructure a little bit more focused. And then the fourth one is about community and community building, community engagement. And then the fifth one is about the organization overall and our health and our our excellence in all services. So I liked how commensurate and comparable, they each were distinctly different. So I liked that. The thing that I thought about, I mean, these things start next week, right? Next Wednesday night is the first one for the community meeting. I actually thought of this as being I don't know how you're going to organize those meetings, but one idea would be to have people come in, not see these to begin with, but have them answer maybe 2 or 3 questions on sticky notes, which were maybe what keeps me up at night as a community member, maybe one, what gets me really excited about Englewood, and maybe a third one of, in 10 years, I would like to brag about Englewood as da-da-da-da-da, whatever, I don't know. And then have them try and sort them and see if they fit under these or do they fit under some other categories that we just really weren't tracking with and that would contest to these categories. Mm-hmm. That could be one way to, that's how you do qualitative research and make it quantitative. We do it all the time to sort, but, it's just a little different way to look at it. But I don't know, that could be an interesting way to go at it. I love the fullness of each category, though. I think there's a lot under it, and I think each would lend themselves to some very specific goals around how to resource a police department, how do we do funding for deferred maintenance, and how I think it would have very, very actionable type things we could do from it. So thanks for working on it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, and before I call on people a second time, I just want to share with you, thank you so much for how you put this together. I mean, when I sat down and looked at those questions, I thought, I don't know, and I really did like the questions after the fact, and I do like how this is put together, and I agree. I don't want to get too much into the specifics for the same reason that several others have already shared, that it may open up discussion, and it could be interesting that some of these general themes could take a different direction from the community that comes out. So, but I think it's general enough that we can do that, and so I'm excited about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for the work. Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And this might get into how do we structure these community meetings that we're going to have. And sometimes I wonder if we lead the witness a little bit when we show them, here's the 5 things already, where I do like the idea of them coming in cold, maybe even some of these questions are there blank already. And what do they say when they've had no suggestion, no prior idea of what council kind of landed on? So I definitely like to get their feedback. I talk about cold a lot, but just them coming in cold, what are their thoughts, and then see where they land without any input from council or any preconceived ideas of here's where we landed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And just a point of information. So are you suggesting that maybe they do something with the questions that we were originally given to answer?
I don't think it would hurt to have them out, that they see exactly what the questions that we were answering.
Okay.
Do you suggest that be done prior to the meeting then?
No, I think as it was suggested, they could just be out at tables, and here's the question, and what are your thoughts on what are the biggest opportunities for Englewood over the next 2 to 3 years? And I think it'd be interesting to see where a lot of people land on that, just not having any prior information of what we've
Thank
said.
you for the clarification.
You bet.
And I think maybe you need to move your mic a little bit closer to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because I was having trouble hearing. Thank you. Councilmember Wink.
Thank you. I see your point, Councilmember Cuesta. I do believe that what was suggested by Member Olson might capture that with 3 questions, which in some way mirrored some of the questions that we had, but allowed more freedom from the community members. And also, of course, some of our questions we would be able to answer, I think, to address, well, sure, but we want the difference. Never mind. But I'm a little in favor of fewer questions rather than the whole set. But regardless, you, Mark, tonight want to know if we are okay saying yes, these 2 workshops. As a council, we think it's good for you, and many of us have commented on how well you've languaged. You've provided the language around this, which we imagine you'll share with the citizens as well. So you're looking for us to say yes, as is. We feel comfortable with you projecting or presenting these to the citizens at these 2 workshops, correct?
Right. I think what would be great tonight is just to get a sense of how to organize those sessions.
Oh, you want okay, so.
Yeah, because looking at some of the goals, I mean, I think it's really important, since this is a council strategic plan, that it is council-led. And so I wanted to talk through a little bit about what that looks like. I hope that most of you can be at least at one of them, and then honestly help facilitate in some way, so that it doesn't feel like a staff-led session. We're here to support you, absolutely, and I can offer some thoughts based on what I've heard so far and how to structure it. But I do think having you all there and participate is important to the
Remind me
to
what
the session.
time they're starting?
6:30.
6:30 to 8? No.
Yeah.
8:30?
Yeah, we'll call it 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it
Well,
goes later.
what was in the Citizen? 6:30 to, was it?
I can't remember if we set an end time or not,
Okay.
but it was 6:30 as a start time. Yeah.
We're good at not having end time.
Okay.
So in terms of tonight, I think what would be helpful is just to get some consensus on how to organize that.
One thing that I would like to see, I would like a section of it to be definitely town hall style, because I think some of the frustration of the community in the past is when they organize it out and people can't hear other people's questions or the answers to their questions. I think that helps communicate when it's more town hall style. Now, we may need to have a section where at the beginning they answer these questions or whatever and put them on sticky notes. But then I think after that it needs to be more town hall style, because I think we'll accomplish a lot more because some people's questions will already be answered. I mean, I'm open for other thoughts on that. Councilmember Olson, did you have?
It's helpful to hear. I guess one of the questions I have is how much of it is a question answer time versus a brainstorming, thinking things up time. And so we probably should be pretty clear about how we want to organize that. I agree that they don't like just coming to things that are too segmented, but for people who process internally, having smaller groups at different times, you know that whole thing. So it'd be good to be able to allow for those who aren't going to speak up in a big group to be able to give their input still.
Yeah.
So I think some combination of it all would be great. Maybe there's a Q&A time for things about what are we doing here and why are we doing it and how does it work, but more from them asking questions rather than us just telling.
Right. Great.
Now that I've been to a visioning session like this, that's... Do we have clickers?
Thank you.
We do. I don't know how many we have. That we have maybe 15 or something like that.
Yeah, 30.
Oh, we have
30,
Okay.
and you can set them up for phones too, so if you, pretty easily, but we'd have to...
We can work on that.
Yeah.
So it'd be kind of fun to do some quick voting of, what it's consensus, sort of like which ones are priorities for you, and you start to see things kind of, then you don't get...
Bashful.
Yeah, and you don't get
intimidation.
maybe influenced by other people that you think, oh, well, I should have done that, or,
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Wink?
One more idea. At the energy session summit last week, was it last week already?
Yeah.
Thursday? Yeah, my goodness. I thought the session at the latter part of the meeting was super successful, and there was tons of engagement. There was this vision setting sort of activity happening and then reporting back to the group. That's another option. You yourself were there and saw how it went, and you led it. So I thought it was very successful, and it's perhaps something, I mean, we could have 5 areas and engage discussion in a smaller group.
Right.
In addition to the larger group talk.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways you can do that. I would recommend having some small group breakout. I think that helps a lot, and depending on how many people you have. But certainly if you have a bigger group, I think splitting it out into small groups at some point is helpful. Framing it on both ends, having here's what we are why we're here, here's what we expect and hope to get out of the night, here's how long you might be here, and then, at the end, kind of that recap, here's how we're taking this information and what you can expect us to do with it, and where you can follow for updates going forward. I think bracketing those three things will be helpful. Now, how you tee that up can be in a number of different ways. You can have each of the small groups do the same activity. Yep. So maybe they have the same set of questions, and then they're talking through, strengths, weaknesses, or hopes and fears and all that kind of stuff, and report out to the group. You can have them each have one of the theme areas and do visioning around that. That's certainly up to you and how that looks. It depends how you want to capture the input. I think the more it can be geared towards the big picture goals, the better, because you're going to use that input to refine your goals and objectives. So I wouldn't want to get it too specific, but it also needs to be led somewhere so that it's not so broad it's not useful.
Thank you. Councilmember Berentine.
Well said again, and that's exactly what I'm concerned about, is I don't want this to turn into them thinking like they're voting on any particular, that we're deciding anything then, or that this is a flushing this out, this is a vetting of this, not a decision. It's part of the tool that we're using to go ahead and move forward with this, and so I don't even want it to kind of look like that. I would like to stick with the questions that we were asked. I don't want it to go off where we began from and kind of reinvent itself, because I think we've got a pretty good foundation, broad, and then so I'm not. I don't want to encourage something going off into left field, like we're asking for their hopes and dreams outside of this, so that we end up starting to go down a rabbit trail with this either. So sure. I would like it to, at least, if you want to pare it down, that's one thing, but at least if it's in the same context of the questions that we were asked, so that we have something to compare it to. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're not really comparing the apples to apples. We're asking them to do something else. So if we could at least keep it in that context, I would appreciate that.
I could certainly reformulate the question so that these were focused on as if you were a council member, so I could reformulate it so it's more geared towards a member of the public, and have it match that, so they're doing some type of similar kind of strengths, weaknesses analysis, and we're asking them to say at the end, and when you report out, come up with 3 or 4 or 5 themes that as a group you've reacted to, and you try to get it that way. I mean, we could
otherwise
do something.
Otherwise, we're not able to compare apples to apples if we're going to ask them
sure.
to do something.
Yeah, I understand that. And then another option is
where we started.
Right, and I'll just say that I could take a crack based on the totality of the feedback tonight and give you an agenda for the 7th on, is that 4th or 5th next week? Monday.
I would agree with
the 5th.
I do agree
Just so
with Councilmember Russell that I would like to see a town hall opportunity, because I think people from the budget breakouts got a little frustrated when they later talked to other people and they said, well, at our table we said this and this. And then, along with that ADU kind of feel to that, there was, more guiding by the staff and less ability for them to kind of be a group together. So, but I agree that there has to be some element of that, but if we could incorporate, the small group piece of it may be necessary, but if we could incorporate that, because I don't think exactly what Councilmember Olson said, if somebody says, boy, I wish I'd have thought of that, because then they may think of what they're thinking differently. And it actually raises the bar instead of, I think, taint it. So I think that has to be there so that they know what their fellow citizens are thinking. And sometimes they look at their fellow citizens and go, you're crazy. Why would you? But it's that interaction, I think, that has been kind of missing out of some
Sure.
of them that I think would be important. Mm-hmm. And I think it should be incorporated, certainly not the only thing, but think that would be a good idea.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
Yeah, I think to build off of what she just said, and Councilmember Quest and I've mentioned this both, I think having some really open-ended spot where we're not leading them to the water or something that allows for them to individually, whether it's the questions that we received from you is fine with me. I'm not wed to questions. I really trust this process as long as we can get some individual time for each of them to respond, and then some larger group, and then some small group discussion. I think, these are messy. They're never going to be perfect, but I think we set them up with a couple different ways that people think and interact with people. Great. It'll be good. I'm looking forward to it.
So on this piece, do you have enough to move forward? And we perhaps could spend a little bit of time on the study session going over this.
Monday the 5th?
Yes. So you have more that you want to go over, right, before?
I think we covered most of this. Yeah, we talked about format. We went in a different way, which is great. The community survey results I mentioned, I just wanted to highlight that those will be a part of the feedback that we're able to do. And then moving forward, I know Councilmember Cuesta had a couple questions about, well, what does this look like? Let's assume we get the feedback and it's positive and we can move forward in some way. What does moving forward look like? So I mentioned this a while back. We have a 7th seat that will be filled here, so certainly that plays into the timing of this. We were talking about doing a retreat in December. We were able to do a procedures retreat, so to speak, but not a strategy session. And so, again, I think we would suggest some type of retreat. The reason we use retreat is it's a dedicated period of time in a less formal setting that's longer than an hour in a study session. So once you get the community feedback, you use that time to finalize your goals, develop the objectives. So again, this would be saying, well, if we're saying embrace history, well, how did we embrace history? Is it more banners around the city, or are we actually designating historic district? Whatever, pardon my example, but point is what are your objectives to meet those goals? That would be your strategic plan. So that's the bulk of the work, so to speak. So that working session to try to finalize before we get into the heart of the budget process. And ideally that timing is sometime in April, early May at the absolute latest. I certainly am sensitive to the special election upcoming, but we want to make sure that if you're going to spend the time in this body and working with the community on trying to establish those goals and objectives, that we can build them into the budget process, because that is obviously the best way to reflect those. So that was, in essence, the last few comments I had about how this actually moves forward.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask a point of information question, and this is going to be rookie question for sure. You mentioned the retreats, Mark. And maybe I'm just thinking retreats in work senses that I've had in the past. We could not meet outside the public's eye, though, correct?
No, correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so a retreat would be in this room, essentially.
It could be anywhere where they can come.
Yeah, it could be in Englewood.
Understood, thank you.
And ideally, this would be facilitated either somebody outside if we felt like that was necessary. But somebody would facilitate the session. You'd have a dedicated special council meeting for that purpose. Thank you.
And
I used to take like 4 hours to 5 hour days on Saturdays for budgets in the past years. It was in here though, but
Sure.
All of 4 hours.
okay, so and it could be longer than a regular council meeting. Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments before we move on?
So if I'm hearing correctly, I'll try to capture this in an agenda for the sessions and bring it back on Monday, and then we'll continue to advertise. Tell your constituents about these sessions.
That'll be great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Conversation is a tribute to the way that you put this together. It was well done.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
Final point of information, pardon me.
Okay.
Will Tony be posting this on Nextdoor?
We certainly can.
I think it would help.
Yeah.
I'll try and use it myself also.
All right. Thank you very much. We will take a bio break.
on Wednesday next week, is that Swedish? Or is that the following?
No, Wednesday next week is at the Carlile. It's the following Thursday. It's a Thursday, not a Wednesday. The following, the 15th, is at Swedish Hospital's Pine Room, which is the 7th.
That's the 15th.
Yes.
So the 7th is at Colorado Finest.
Yes.
I don't have places on here for some.
Yeah, Colorado's Finest, just in the, probably the,
We have the auditorium.
the auditorium this time, not the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was,
Better get a lot of people there.
I know, I know.
well, the cafeteria was, so all the pipes are exposed.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right.
So loud.
Yeah.
The water return was like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have to blast out there again.
That was like Chinese water torture last year in that room.
I know.
Oh.
The pings and the...
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So true. What do you got there?
Dead plant leaves.
Oh, I was like,
What? Want to water a plant outside?
that bad? Well, might just have been shocked by
Hey, them your cars are good. You're good there.
heat off on the weekend because the system's either on or off. There's no ramping up in between, so it might have freaked the plant out. Oh, is it dry?
Should I take some water?
I'll
No,
take care of
just
it.
whoever's supposed to.
All right. Good, good.
I mean, if we're only gonna have one, we could at least
I'm
look
like-
like we're
I thought you had a banana peel or something. I was like, did somebody throw their banana
just
peel?
gonna throw it downstairs.
Because we didn't like the
Oh,
colors.
That's a lot in one weekend.
No, we did that for.
So on a 3-day weekend, it just kind of.
Decision. We're like $100.
So it doesn't
Painted this one.
Yeah, so
$40 a product.
Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna go to the cafe.
Maybe I'll need another couch.
Thank push some buttons.
So when I was in DC, one of my months was at the Garden Space Center. Gave a tour.
I like the man who worked
Oh
there.
my goodness.
Yeah.
I had never been, I mean, I just been to DC so many times, but it's kind of a haul to get out to.
I used to drive there on the way. God,
Yeah?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I went in and saw the clean room and
Yeah, when I worked at Hopkins and I lived in Arlington still, and I'd just drive and I'd drive past it. Yeah.
it's very fun.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Did they take you to the
I love their
errands
public
places?
transportation.
Other metros.
It's
the
so
best.
easy to use.
So lovely.
Yeah,
Sensible.
except that
I never felt
I was
gonna get
kind of
mugged
down on the
in all
hill
years.
almost most of the time and just
You were?
used Uber everywhere. And
Yeah.
You did?
And left, yeah.
Because it was, yeah.
Because it was just, you know,
It's not-
or I walked, you know, like there were 15-minute walks, 16-minute walks, but
Yeah.
anything over about 20 minutes,
Yeah.
I'd take it because I was on a schedule. But when I got there on Wednesday night, it was 74 degrees.
Wow.
Leaving 3 degrees here and going there.
It makes it nicer to walk around. When I went there, it was
My
freezing.
clothes,
Wow,
like,
I bet
oh,
you
let's
did.
go out to dinner.
Oh my word. That's
The next day it was
fantastic.
50 and people were complaining, and I'm like, no, this is better
Do you feel
than
relieved
5
that that's off your
degrees.
chest now? Oh, yeah.
And then we go to the strategy session.
People were in shorts and
Oh, I bet they
t-shirts,
were.
Okay.
and it was
I'm glad they're right.
early in the day.
Yeah.
86 or something crazy.
Pretty much all the way around the day. Yeah. It's already working. It's already working out. Mark, good job.
I wonder if people get any national tweets on that, you know?
Yeah, right? No.
No climate issue there.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I gotta figure out why these are not.
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Oh, dang.
Another Monday. They come so fast, don't they? They just do. Yeah.
Okay, where are you? Goals and priorities.
It's Founder's Day.
I did go get some tea.
You did?
Yes.
I'm drinking water.
Well, I use the same format.
I don't, this flu that I've been battling every few days, it's not all gone. So now it's settled in my throat. My voice goes away for a while. This can go on for a week.
And, Dan got that respiratory thing before Christmas. He got it again. And I said to him, please don't share it. But then, so I started taking vitamin C.
I know, we're doing everything we can not to get sick, but this has been a rough year.
Yeah, it has. So,
Yeah, and Sam's over there hacking. We gave him the evil eye during break.
oh, I didn't even
I
see
heard him
him.
hacking.
Did you hear him
Well, he
hacking?
went in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was like,
but
oh my
don't
God,
know
is he
what
okay?
happened over here, and I thought, bless your heart, I'm sorry you're sick. Do not make me sick.
Right. We can start wearing masks.
I was noticing a lot of people posting pictures.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I was thinking, I really good idea.
Well, can you imagine, especially being around that many
The
people?
next page was these two.
Yeah.
Which, there is a criminal element look to that. I'm just,
Oh, for sure.
but at the same time, I
We could try it. Might be a new look for us. You get started?
Yeah, should I text him?
No, just start. And
We
open
can't
it.
start without him. Mr.
He's
Keck
close-
is the
he's close
presenter.
enough.
Okay. We are ready to go.
4 minutes ahead.
Yes, we absolutely are.
Oh, well,
Um,
it ended up for the best.
Welcome
Bless
back to the
you.
study session. The
Get
next
together.
item on the agenda is council goals and priorities. City Manager Eric Keck is here to discuss city council goals and priorities.
I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Actually, thank you, Mayor, members of council. So thanks to all the council members who participated, which was all of you, with respect to putting together your thoughts for goals and priorities. Obviously, the discussion that just transpired, talking about goals or major themes, really is going to guide, I believe, as you move forward with these goals and priorities that you've established, where those are going to fit in. So tonight, I don't know how much time we really need to spend on this, other than just to say, again, thank you for your thoughtfulness in putting these together. And so, again, we had some very thoughtful suggestions for things to do, and you see those within your packet. Some of you took great lengths to describe exactly what you want to see. But again, what I want to suggest to you, Council, is that with what you have prepared and put together, I think over the next month, as you gain the public's input on your goals or your strategy for the next 2 years, that many of these will begin to flow and fit in with those components. And again, many of the projects that you're suggesting, redevelopment, there's some common themes in here with some of them, redevelopment, good governance, capital project funding, those types of things are perfect. And so your thought processes are going in the right direction. And so, Mayor, I don't know if we definitely wouldn't suggest that we go through the process that we used last year. I think that took way too long, and it simply just didn't do, I think, with what was expected. I think we as staff took your ideas and thoughts and began to work on them ahead of that and accomplish some of those things. But with this, I think this needs to be held in abeyance perhaps until such time as you have the opportunity to gain the public input on your goals for this next 2 years, and then slot these projects in.
I agree. Councilmember Barentine?
I absolutely agree with what he's saying. I mean, the process that we went through before, while I don't think, we have council members here that weren't part of that, so there's a little bit more to some of it but I think this really needs to be integrated with what we're doing with the strategic plan. Otherwise, right. What's the point of this if this is separate and maybe competing for both our time and attention? If we don't integrate it into it, then it's...
You're here.
I'll take that as a yes from her.
Yes.
I don't know. But I really would like to see it kind of woven in as we're doing this, because I do think that it'll end up competing and take a different direction if we don't have that focus on what we're doing with the strategic plan.
I absolutely agree. And that's kind of what I saw after meeting with Mark, that it probably was going to go that direction. Anyway, so are there any other comments or things? Otherwise, I think we're just going to table this and see how it fits in. And so thank you all. I do want to thank you for taking time to do this. And I agree that the way it went last year just was not effective. So, all right. Let's move on to agenda item 5, a proposed charter amendment for mayor selection. And it says that the city attorney Alison, McKenney Brown, and city clerk Stephanie Carlile are present to discuss the proposed charter amendment for mayor selection. But I actually would like to open this up to Councilmember Cuesta. He is the one that has asked for this, and I would like for him to share with us some of his thoughts as to why, and then we'll open that for discussion.
You bet.
We don't have these in our packet, do we?
We do not, no. We even have them for the...
Good thing we didn't pass those procedures yet.
You can send this to us, though, right?
You bet. I mean, I had my thoughts on my own piece of paper, and I figured I'd at least put them in slides
No,
so
I
you guys
appreciate
be able
it.
to
No,
get a
it's
better
fine.
visual on them.
No,
I
it's
think
fine.
I even have enough for the crowd if you guys are careful.
And she'll make sure that it's included in the packet piece on the
sweet.
website.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, am I good to start rambling here?
Yes,
Thank
go ahead.
you. I appreciate it.
Hang on just a second. Did you have something you need to share first, or?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephanie.
Well, thank you to council for giving me the audience for this, as well as my constituents and the folks here in Inglewood. Prior to me even joining council, I always thought it was strange that council did make the selection of mayor. And I think that there's many reasons why it would be better suited in the hands of the citizens as opposed to in the hands of essentially 4 council members being able to decide who's mayor at any given time. What I am proposing, and there's a lot of room for us to move this around and get to a place that everybody's comfortable with, is we just put the question before the citizens, and this would be done in an amendment. Would they like to make the decision of who would be mayor? And this could be done every 2 years or every 4 years, depending upon the frequency at which they want to do that. So what I'm proposing, getting to that first slide, is that we would put the amendment question on the ballot for 2018. Would the citizens like to convert one of the 2 at-large seats that would be open in November 19 to an elected mayor position? If that were to pass in 18 by the citizens, then on the November 19 ballot, you would have 1 at-large council seat, and then the first elected mayor seat would be there for the citizens to vote on. What changes? The singular purpose of this is just to allow the citizens to elect their mayor, as opposed to having 4 members of council make that selection for them. The mayor position, again, could be kept at 4-year term, as it is with the at-large position currently. I think that would be the most seamless at this point, although if council members, or even we got feedback from citizens that they thought that a 2-year term would be better, they could have that frequency and choice be increased. I do think 2 years is a quick turnaround for somebody to have to run a campaign every 2 years, so I think that gets a little tough, but the option would be there. What stays the same? My major intention here is to give no additional authority or decrease in authority to the mayor. The weak mayor system would remain. The mayor would still have a vote that's equal to all other council members. They would have no veto power. The mayor would remain as the presiding officer of council meetings, as well as ceremonial duties. And again, the primary point here is to make sure that nothing changes in the mayor's role or authority, just that the selection of the mayor goes to an election by the citizens as opposed to 4 agreeing council members. What are the benefits to this? I see them as being several. For starters, I think it gives increased decision-making to the citizens. I think that's always a good thing. If we can take decisions out of the hands of council and put them into the citizens' grasp, put it on a ballot, I think it's good government. I think it shows better transparency. Secondly, I think that any person who wants to be mayor will get far better vetting if they have to go knock doors, they have to put themselves in front of every single citizen every 2-4 years, as opposed to just appealing to 3 of their fellow council members. I think that that's a far better system to really shake out the best person, and then again put it in the hands of citizens to see who they want to represent them as a presiding officer, as a ceremonial figurehead, etc. I also think that the mayor selection has created some discord amongst council at points in the past. That's certainly not a regularity, but it has happened here and there. It does take time away from council, and I think it can serve as a distraction. If the citizens are making that vote, it's set. We know it's going to be that way every 2 to 4 years, and council can move on with other business. Those are my initial thoughts on this. I'm really looking forward to the feedback from everyone. I do think that this is something that is both practical, I think it's principled, and it's pragmatic, in that it's very simple to get this done by converting 1 seat. I think it is the right thing to do, to give the citizens the opportunity to at least decide if they would like to elect the mayor. And I think it's pragmatic. Again, this can be done very simply. I don't think there's going to be a great deal of cost if we can place it on this 18 ballot, and then if it were to pass in 18, put it into effect in 19. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to more comments on this.
Okay,
Thank you, guys.
thank you. And I think probably we should, if you have some questions right now, you can go ahead and ask. The city attorney has some
I just want to
information.
ask Councilmember a question.
Please.
Aside from that, you thought it was weird that the council appointed. Why? I mean, I'm a little confused why you think that that's what necessarily be better for the council. I mean, if it's the exact same position on there.
I'm not sure that I understood the question.
Why do you think it would be I mean, I guess I'm somewhat taken aback when you say anytime we can take the decision-making out of council and put it in the hands of the citizens, then we would just be asking them to vote on anything. They went ahead and we're all each of us elected. I mean, so I don't necessarily, as a generalized statement, agree with what you're saying. I don't believe that anytime we can take a decision out of the hands of council and put it in, otherwise we would be having them vote on our budget and all of that, then what would they elect us for? So if I don't just agree with the premise that any time you can take it out of the hands of council and put it into the citizens to make that choice, then because it's kind of vague, then I'm wondering why the selection of the mayor that way would you believe that it would eliminate any kind of discourse, or I don't think it's been very time-consuming for the most part in the past, but why do you think that would make it better for council?
Absolutely. I think that any time it's practical, yes, decisions should absolutely be put in the hands of citizens. This would be a great case. They're already voting for that at-large seat. We could convert that to a mayor's seat. There would really be no change in function outside of they would be voting on the mayor as opposed to an at-large seat. It's certainly not practical.
Sorry, did you say any time you can take it and put it in the hands of the citizens?
That's practical, yes.
Okay, and I guess that's just the part that then in that case, I guess it's not a question. You've answered it. I disagree with that because we don't have that process in place to try to do that for anything else. So unless you're saying it's only for this particular thing that you believe that that's a good idea, or any time we could go ahead and put the decision-making into the hands of the citizens rather than council.
I think in terms of practicality, it will always be case by case what we can put in the hands of the citizens. But I think, yes, when those opportunities arise, we should certainly pursue them. This being one of them. I think this is a very easy way to put a decision in the hands of the citizens.
Okay, so I'm going
He answered my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez, I mean, we could ask this. I don't think it's quite as simple as you've outlined it.
And I would like to hear those thoughts on why it isn't that simple.
Okay. That's why I'm going to ask the city attorney to share. And I've also asked Stephanie to look into a general election. In a general election year, generally the city does not put questions on the ballot. If we have some, we can do that. But there is a cost. And so I've asked Stephanie to go back and look at what the cost will be to add those to the ballot if we decide to do that. But first, I would, Alison, would you talk to us a little bit about the problems that happened in Castle Rock, perhaps?
Yes. Now, I need everybody to understand in advance that I am not a Castle Rock expert. But the city manager and I were having a quick discussion, and he suggested that Castle Rock has just been through this process. They actually had their vote in November of 2017. And he said, look at how that's gone. And so I did. And it's not gone well. So just from what I'm able to pick up out of the newspapers, it looks like the citizens put together a petition, and the petition was to change one of the council seats to the mayor's seat, but that mayor's seat would be for a 2-year term, as I'm remembering, and they actually also said that there was a shorter reelection term limit, so that a mayor could only be reelected twice, whereas city council members can be reelected 3 times. So that was brought forth by state statute. Once that petition came forward, Castle Rock interpreted state statute to say that the city put the language for the charter amendment on the ballot. Again, I don't have any good details here, but that's not the interesting part of the story. The interesting part of the story is it passed by 66%, but because the devil's in the details, there weren't enough details within the charter amendment, so
while it's passed, it's gone back to the city council, and the city council is trying to figure out how to implement it. Of course, the city council has some additional issues, and a couple members of city council in protest have not shown up to the city council meetings, apparently, subsequent to this vote, which is holding up all sorts of city business. But the point I'm wanting to make is that if this is something that council decides it wants to move forward on, it actually will require modifying several sections of charter, and based on the conversation that you all are having tonight, I would go back and, with the assistance of Stephanie, we'd pull out all of the different sections of charter that would require amendment and bring those forward in some kind of draft, because we'd want to make sure that we got it right with the first election. One of the issues, and we've heard this here locally, is that when an initiative is passed or something happens, the citizens at large are not legal experts, and they don't understand why if they vote on something or if something passes, it's not immediately put into effect the way they imagined it should have been put into effect. And everybody who votes on something has their own perceptions. So if 20,000 people vote on something, there's 20,000 perceptions of what exactly that means. So what I'm hoping for is if this is something this council wants to move forward on, that we get consensus on these details about should the mayor have a 2-year term or a 4-year term, should the duties of the mayor be expanded or not, should the mayor be term limited to a shorter term than anybody else, or I just think that there are details that you all have to make sure you get right before you take this to the public.
And what I would like to, so you would have to go back. Every area of the charter that this changes, there would require a charter amendment, so there may be more than one question on the ballot that we would send for.
That's very possible. I want to be clear, though, because there are so many questions open with this possibility. I started to work on it, and then I thought, no, I need input from you. So exactly what this will look like, I don't know. But, yeah, it's very possible that we'd have to ask for an amendment of several provisions. Castle Rock just said, should the charter be amended to allow for? But I think that's asking for trouble. I think that we need to be very clear. Should X section of charter be amended to allow for? Should X section of charter be amended so that the citizens know exactly what they're getting when they vote?
Okay, thank you. And so each question that we would put on the ballot, is there an additional expense for each question we put on, or?
I mean, the way that Arapahoe County does it, so 2 years ago in 2016, we had 2 referred measures and 3 initiated issues come forward on the ballot. And so it was around $21,000 for that off-year election. I mean, I do think that they do it based off content, but if you're participating, you're participating, and they weight it based on how many people are participating in the election, and they divide the expenses off a weighted population. So, I mean, it's hard to say whether if it would cost that much. Was that a lot because we had several issues? I don't know for sure, but there is a cost involved to having something go on the ballot.
Okay. And
but it doesn't necessarily need to be $21,000.
I did go to one of the meetings and where they had some people putting it on, and the break difference was actually, if there were 2 more issues, it would have gone to another page. Then all of a sudden, she's right in that I was very impressed when he said it depends on how many people participate in the pool of that particular election. And where the page breaks, I guess, are, or how the words are, because then I understood when he said, but one more, and we got to put another page out. and that would make a huge cost difference. So it really is very dependent on who all is participating.
Thank you. And do you have anything else you need to share before I?
No, I'm just here to answer
Okay,
questions, and
great.
certainly there's deadlines attached to this.
Okay.
So if we are moving forward with any type of charter amendment, we need to make sure there's
What
a lot
are
of
those
statutory deadlines
Right.
that we need to meet. But we're just here to listen to the discussion
All right.
and understand if we're moving
Thank you.
forward.
All right. Let's move on with the discussion then. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. I have a procedural question also about how this ended up on the study session so quickly, but I'll ask that during council member's choice to not distract from what we're talking about. And it was my understanding that each charter amendment would have to be voted on individually, so I would like to know, I guess, have a better idea, if we're going to go forward with this, how many amendments that would be. Is it 2? Is it 25? I mean, I don't want to overwhelm the voters either with, with these, different amendments. And then, Councilmember Cuesta, are you suggesting that the mayor pro tem process remains
Correct.
up to council to decide?
That does not get touched.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think he was next, or not me.
Actually, I
I'm
think
last.
Councilmember Wink was up.
I was there after Martina.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So Councilmember Wink.
Yeah, it's not me, I know that.
So based on just a preliminary review of this handout and of Member Cuesta's words tonight, what I hear is the argument being presented in support of this change as an argument that's significantly flawed. So what I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I heard that the reason for requesting this change is one, and I wrote down the quote, because of some mayoral discord, which hasn't really happened that often, and 2, because one individual thought it was strange that Englewood City Council appointed. You said you thought it was strange way back before you were on council, and that of some mayoral discord. So those were the 2 reasons I heard, which is why we're even discussing this. And
Please.
yeah, thank you. In my view, for a change of this magnitude to our city's government, I would like to see logical justification presented in terms of what's not working and what's the real quantitative, qualitative, what is the tangible series of challenges that need to be corrected, and how they've affected our staff, our council, our citizens, for us to take time away from building up staff morale right now, our staff's time, our current investment in the special election process, our upcoming November election as is with the special election, the fact that we have no mayor at this time. We're trying to develop a strategic plan. We have goals with respect to finalizing our rules of order and policy initiatives. We have a budget that's already set and in motion. I see this, and the conversation has begun in terms of us trying to quantify maybe the dollars that could go towards such a change for the November election. I have a strong feeling that we won't know until we're at the other side of it, as happened with the special election. I don't know what the cost in the end is, but I remember conversations with a lot of people who regretted voting for the special election because they didn't realize what the real cost would be. And so I want to caution us, cost, whether financial or time or effort, all of it together. I think we have our plates quite full, and I just didn't hear what I believe is
Excuse me.
a logical argument to even discuss such a major change to our city's government. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, I'm going to let Councilmember Olson go first because you had an opportunity to present.
Oh, okay. I'm fairly agnostic, really, about this one way or the other. There are some concerns I have with it. I mean, I think we need to obviously really think it through. You gave way more than what I was even thinking about at first blush. One thing I'm a little bit concerned about with a change to this would be how, well, first of all, just because someone's elected doesn't mean that people get along, and you know that. I'm sure that's not what you mean by this either. I know lots of councils where mayors are elected and there's discord like crazy too, so it doesn't ensure anything. So I think we'd want to be really clear about why we are doing it. What does it do for Englewood overall that really is going to move us to the next level of our own leadership? And I think, secondly, I'm worried about the way in which terms go for districts versus at-larges and not cutting someone off from some areas in the future. So I don't know how that all gets worked out. So before we'd ever go forward on anything like this, I'd want to see a lot of different examples from different cities. We do know there's several that have done it recently. Castle Rock's one I've heard negative things about, but there are other things there too. And I've known others that have done it, I think, fine. So yeah, that's where I am on it.
Okay, thank you. And I want to share first, one of the things I did have some concerns about this also. I put it on the agenda because if there was consensus to move forward with this, we have a limited amount of time to go on, but I'm really kind of thinking perhaps we need to take consensus of whether we want to move forward with this before we ever decide that we're spending any more time. And in fairness, I will just say that one thing that we need to consider, I believe, is if there is a citizen initiative, which possibly could happen, we probably need to be ahead of the curve so that we're not in a situation like Castle Rock. So, and one other thing I would also like to say, I think some of the concerns that have been brought forward, I do believe can be addressed in our policy manual and can be changed. And I think some of the discussion that we're discussing really would fit into what we're going to be discussing in the policy manual about there have been some changes in the new policy manual surrounding the selection of a mayor. And so I think maybe some of these issues could be addressed there. With that, Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. I agree with City Attorney Brown. The initiative in Castle Rock, which did support or pass with 67% support, 10,400 votes in favor, 5,000 against, was written poorly. What they did is they just generically said, should the citizens be able to elect a mayor without putting that plan in place of here's exactly how that looks. They had the what, they didn't have the how. And I think if we include the how, which I've outlined a very smooth way to do it, it goes very, very well. Councilmember Wink, I am surprised to hear that you think that giving the citizens the choice to vote for mayor is beneath discussion. I think it's a very, very valid conversation. I brought it up with at least 20 citizens. I've had 2 say that they would not be in favor of it. I think the Castle Rock numbers show that, and that's a different town, for sure, but I think that generally there is a favor for this. I think people do like to select their own elected officials. I would be very, very surprised if this did not pass if on a ballot, if written appropriately. I wouldn't have brought it here. If I thought this was a losing effort or it was just going to fail, I wouldn't even have brought it up. But I think this does pass if it makes the ballot. I appreciate the concern that if this goes citizen initiative as well, as was shown in Castle Rock, if it's not written correctly, it can be messy on the back end. So I think we have the opportunity here to do it right. I do think that the citizens would like this. I think that the citizens would at least like to make that decision, and I think the citizens will choose to elect their own mayor as opposed to having 4 of us select it. This is a selfless act of council. We are giving up power here. We're giving it back to the citizens. It may step on people's terms. It may be an issue there, but that's what we're here for, is to carry out the will of the people. I think this would be the will of the people put in front of them, and if that takes some work, that we should do it. I would at least like to see the question go forward. I think these are good questions, too. Would it be separate amendments for each place that needs to be altered in charter? And I'm identifying 3 to 4. We want to keep those as minimal as possible. Can we get an estimate on the costs, et cetera? But I think just saying there's no reason for this or it's beneath discussion is surprising to me. I thought there would be a little bit more traction with this just because it is putting power back into the hands of the citizens.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
It's important to know history, and the citizens decided on this form of government to have a council, city manager form of government. That's what they decided. They had that choice. Lack of information for some of the citizens to understand the form of government that we have, that the mayor actually sits as president of the council and not really a mayor. It's not really a mayor position. There's actually some reference to just, the chair. Some of the charters that were written around the same time as ours actually call it a president of the council. And people identify more with the term mayor. The people already elect their mayor. All of us are elected. I think you might be stretching it a little bit far to put it in terms that somehow we're taking any decision out of the hands of the citizens, because the only way somebody can be here to be present, to be chosen as the president of this council, is if they were already elected by the citizens. So they are already elected. So I think that's putting it a little harshly, as if we're taking something away, or that we have the power to give them something. They already do it. To put it to have a mayoral position that is no better than what we currently have, which is a president of this council, which is just the chair position. And while it has some authority, that's the authority that the rest of the elected officials here, elected by this community, provide. But if we're going to go ahead and have a mayoral position similar to all of the other ones that function well have started that way from the beginning. They've just always had it that way. If you look at like Greenwood Village, where he doesn't really vote, and they have some more authority in what they're doing, then there's a huge difference in relationship of how we would be doing business and how we would be handling administrative issues, and we would need to look at that. I don't want to just make people think that they're getting a mayor. I don't want them to just believe that, just like they kind of believe right now they actually vote for the mayor. They don't. Some of them are misinformed on the way that we have our structure here, and I understand that, and it's our obligation to inform them. And I don't want to trick them into thinking we're giving them a mayor position when we're not really doing that. It's the same thing. It's just we're not picking them. And I think Councilmember Olson is right that it's not going to bring peace or less discord or whatever. That's all inherent in the people that sit in the positions, not in the position itself. When I still did the Inglewood Citizens for Open Government, I actually pulled a petition and did this to go ahead and do a mayor position, and started to get signatures for it. And it's very easy to get signatures for it. People believe they already get the mayor now. But quite honestly, the reason we dropped it was because the more we looked at this, and I think it was in 2011, and the reason we ended up dropping it was because people didn't really understand the purpose of the mayor. I think we were getting into too many kind of dark issues with what exact power. But the real reason we dropped it was because it was anecdotal. It was to fix a problem that we thought existed at the time with the leadership of council. And by doing that, we may have corrected that one problem that we thought was existing then, but we were creating a problem for the future. Once you change that over, then you create another issue. If you do, you cannot take what Castle Rock did separate from the problems and the reasons that those citizens came forward to thinking they were fixing a problem in the leadership, that they were going to take control, and that they thought they were fixing a problem there, and they've created another problem for themselves. I think Councilmember Russell is correct that, Mayor Pro Tem, that we may have some other ways to deal with it not being as volatile a position that we could discuss. But if we're going to do this mayoral position, then we need to do a mayoral position. Because I have no intention of trying to trick the citizens into thinking that they've got a mayor that has some kind of power that they're voting on to have that leadership piece when that's not what's happening. And I think anytime you try to fix problems, as you've outlined here, that are quite honestly anecdotal and rare, and we maybe have faced some of them recently, but that doesn't make them any more. I think that out of the frying pan and into the fire, that the problems that you think that you might be fixing with this will create a whole plethora of other problems that will be worse than what we were trying to resolve, and I don't wish to have a knee-jerk reaction to this. So while I sympathize with it, because I certainly went down this path once before, and we dropped it, and I believed it was for very good reasons, and the more people understand the charter and the way that this we're set up with this mayor, with the council, city manager form of government rather than council, mayor setup is important, and we need to explore that a little bit more on how those things will change. We cannot elect a mayor and not have the people believe that they have empowered somebody to have more authority than the rest of the people on this council. They will believe it. And I would be more than happy to have the conversation, if we're going to pursue this, on making sure then that when they elect a mayor that we're actually giving them something that is more of a mayor rather than the president of this council. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. I give the voters more credit than that. I don't think we're tricking them. I think that they'll know what they're voting on. I think that they deserve the opportunity to make that choice. These are the same folks that we asked to elect us. They had the good faith to elect us. We trust their wisdom to elect us. I think that they can handle the concept. I think they understand what kind of government it is, and I think it is a fair question to put before them to let them decide. Again, I trust the wisdom of the voters more than I trust the wisdom of us. And I think it's more than anecdotal. I don't want to dig too deep into specifics, but there have been several recent occurrences that were regrettable, I would say, in the selection of mayor or reselecting who the mayor would be. It happens, and it creates discord. I heard it as I was knocking doors even this past November, and that was many months removed from one particular incident. It leaves bad taste in people's mouth. It can create bad blood. It can create division. And so I think that these are real incidents that have happened very recently. I can think of two, as a matter of fact. So I think that they're very, very true, and I think, again, if we can put this into the hands of citizens, it at least removes that component where, not to say that there won't be bad blood amongst council members, but at least won't be bad blood based upon the procedure of how mayor was selected.
Councilmember Alison.
Yeah, I think as long as I've been on council, it's always been a bit of a contested process of trying to pick who's the next mayor. One of the things that I agree with you, we trust our citizens to vote. Most people do not understand our form of government. They do not know that we have a manager-driven kind of system here. And I think that if we were to do this, we would have to make really clear with people what it is and go out of our way to do that. I still have people asking me, what they think the mayor is a full-time job and has an office over here. You might feel like it's full-time right now, but they don't understand the strong manager system. The other piece that I get a little bit nervous about is this ability to actually work together well if a brand new person comes on who has never served before. And I've heard that from other cities across the state that, oh my goodness, we have this new mayor and they were never on council and like they have no idea what they're doing. It takes them a couple years. So that'd be the other piece I'd want to somehow have. But I know that's not the way it works everywhere. So that piece worries me a little bit for some. Yeah, so I don't know. I think we got to be really clear about why we're doing this. If it's a few conversations with people you've had who are upset about whatever happened last February and a few other times before, that is not a good enough reason to change the charter. I think we have to do well with what we've been asked to do right now and going forward and make sure that we get in the right place. So,
thank you. Councilmember Wink.
I agree wholeheartedly with what Councilmember Olson just shared regarding the why of why moving forward with this change. I also want to say, if it helps, that I campaigned in 4 districts from August till November, And I can say that more than the majority of the voters with whom I spoke, or the people whose homes that, I visited, did not understand our form of government. They were shocked and asked me lots of questions about it. So I do think it would take a little bit of extra work for us to correct that. Should we go down this road? And maybe after the meeting, re-listen to what I said earlier. I don't think it was that citizens, it's beneath us. I don't remember quite what you said, but that wasn't quite the emphasis. It was just, where are the real reasons for doing this? I just didn't feel I'd heard it well stated. Thank you.
So Councilmember Wink, actually I do want to get consensus, and since you have the floor, would you have consensus to move forward with this or no?
No.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Cuesta.
As one form of statement, thank you. I would say we are not changing the charter. You're asking the
We have to
citizens
change the
if
charter.
they would like to change the charter. We would put this before the citizens for their decision. This isn't council making the decision. We're giving them the choice to make the choice.
We would
I
be
like to
making
emphasize
we
that.
would be making the choice to change the charter if we put this before them. That's so.
We would be giving the citizens a choice to change it. And yes, we would be putting it on the ballot to give them the choice.
The truth is, the citizens have the choice to change the charter whenever they want. They just do a ballot initiative and move it forward.
There is the citizen initiative component. I think that gets much messier, as was outlined in the town of Castle Rock.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the time on this to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson, would you like to weigh in on whether you want?
I am fairly agnostic. To me, it's not a pressing issue right now, and so I'm not like chomping at the bit. But if you all think we needed to go that direction, sure, let's do it. I just don't. This is not what I'm hearing from people of what needs to happen in Englewood right now.
Right.
But we need to get another 7th member, and that will. I mean, we have to reshuffle the deck or figure out what happens next, and yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That won't help us now, though.
Councilmember Barentine. Councilmember Barentine.
Councilmember also wants to do first.
What?
She already said. She'll
did
go
she
either
say?
way. She'll go either way.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm fine to say no right now. And,
Okay.
and one other reason, I think, no, it's not worth going down this road over and over. It's fine. I'm not that compelled to do it right now. I can see us in the future maybe reconsidering it, but I'm not.
Thank you.
I would agree. I think that I would like to see, like I said, I've been here before. I thought, hey, this is a great idea. This is what we ought to do. And then I started looking into it, saw all the pitfalls and traps, and I would really like to see how things go with Castle Rock, with a community that's switching from one form to the other, because it's a huge difference than when you're set up like that, like what Centennial did. They set it up like that, and it's just a huge difference for how that's going in there. And we need to look at the authority that they have, the different roles that they have. We would need to do a little bit more introspective educating ourselves on this, as well as the citizens, because I think that if they truly want that, then they need to want it because they have, they believe the kind of leadership that they would get out of a true mayoral position would be worthwhile, because what it seems that we're doing is just trying to circumvent the vote of council because it's anecdotal, and I don't want to do that. I just don't want to do that. I think once you start messing with the process and procedures like that, and you think that if I can work this square peg into this round hole for this situation, then I'm going to be able to fix this particular problem in this space and time, and then you don't realize that 10 years later it causes a huger problem. You're better off sticking with procedures even when sometimes they don't go the exact way you'd like at that moment. You're better to follow the law. Back to my objective and goal. No. Even when you're not getting necessarily at that moment what you think you want, I think having a process and procedures that everybody knows that's what it is, and then working the tweaks and kinks out of it sometimes are probably a lot better. I'm a little concerned about moving forward with it right now without having a little bit more information, especially from what Castle Rock has done. And Councilmember, Mayor Russell is correct. We, the citizens can always change the initiative, change the charter. They have that authority and power. I've done it. I've been out there all over the city doing petitions and put stuff on the ballot three or four different times already. So I'm not a stranger to that. They have that power to do that. It would be the council putting this out there, and I think without the proper education that we are misleading them, that I want us to, if we do this, that we have to make sure that it's with a lot of thought and as much experience as we can garner from what's going on in other places before we do it, because they will assume that we have vetted this and that we know what we're asking them to do, and we're not close to that.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
I agree with a lot of what's been stated tonight, and we really do have a lot of more pressing, urgent matters. To Councilmember Wink's comment earlier, she listed a short laundry list of the things that I think are more important than this right now, more pressing. So for those reasons, I don't think we should take it up at this time.
Okay, thank you. So, the city manager.
Don't take it from
Thank you. I really appreciate the thoughtful discussion that's been had here this evening, but it sounds like there's no consensus to move this forward. But one of the things I'm concerned with when that happens, obviously there's a group of citizenry out there who wishes to make this move forward, and I want to make sure that we kind of have some sort of discussion so they understand some of these pitfalls. I think as Member Barentine has brought up this evening, I've seen it all too often, even here in Inglewood. It started when a citizen brought forth a citizen initiative dealing with the Save the Inglewood Fire Department, and it was written in such a way, had it got on the ballot, we wouldn't have been able to provide paramedic service, and the community would have been harmed by that. And then the marijuana or the cannabis issue that council started to discuss and then said, no, we don't want to go down this road, and now we're limited to how much we can charge for a permit, and we're capped on the sales tax that's transpiring. So again, I'm not urging council to reconsider their decision here. What I'm suggesting is there needs to be some sort of forum, if possible, to help provide and collaborate with our citizenry. So if, in fact, something does come forward, it's not going to tie your hands as a council or create chaos as it has in Castle Rock. And again, I'm not saying this because I think that people aren't smart enough to help eliminate that, but I'm just concerned with that, and so that we don't end up in a position where we have something that is going to be tough for us to deal with. And I don't disagree with what's been said tonight, that there are many pressing issues that need to be dealt with, and this perhaps hasn't risen to the top of that, but it is something for you to consider as a group, and not suggesting that I tie up more of my colleagues' time here as the attorney to help set the stage to make sure that we don't end up with some untenable citizen initiative, but that's just a concern.
May I ask, it's my understanding there's a few more communities that are thinking of doing this because of what happened with Castle Rock, including, I believe it's come up in Littleton, that they may be pursuing this as well, that we try to garner some of the information in somewhat, some timely manner, so that if this does start to come forward or be talked about at the coffees or town halls, that we can have some kind of information come forward about some of the things we might be facing if we were to move forward with something like this, and could just give you a little bit of time to put something together for us.
May I treat that as a council request so that as we get
Sure.
that stuff pulled together, I can just send it out to you all and you can review it?
I'd appreciate that, because just from some of the cursory conversation coming up in Littleton, it's a quagmire, right? I mean, of all these issues. Once the lawyers start, sorry, no offense, but once the lawyers start, and they're trying to protect the citizens and make sure the charter is honored, but questions I never thought of that come up, so are the unintended consequences of some things. So I just would like to know, because like I said, I went down that path myself. I thought it was a good idea, but and we want to know what we're doing.
And as a point of information, what information exactly are you seeking there per the council's request?
Information about what some of the other cities have currently or in the recent past dealt with when they've approached this issue.
And that's through either council or citizen initiative?
Yeah, I didn't think it was limited. I just thought
Thank
we
you.
need to reach out and see what other cities are doing.
And with that, were you going to include what the role is of the ones that are mayors in this area? If you could,
Whether or not they're a strong mayor or weak mayor.
what
or
authorities they have, because I think most of the mayors were set up from the beginning, right? Yeah, well, except for now, yes. So, and then the problems with Castle Rock. Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
So it sounds like we're actually moving this forward a bit, at least for more information, right? That's what it sounds like,
right.
because we've just asked you to do some work on this. I think that's important. I think one of the questions I have for you, Member Cuesta, and maybe this is more difficult, do you know of a group who's planning to do this? Or are you a part of a group that's going to do this?
My first goal was to take this to my fellow members here and see where this got.
And if
then,
it
and then
doesn't?
see where it goes from there. I'm not entirely sure. We'll see where it goes from there. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard, I agree, to collect the 550 signatures, whatever it takes, for somebody to get this on the ballot. So I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility.
It's 576, and it's not as easy as you
Right.
And I don't
So-
want to see
Actually, 597.
Oh, okay. See?
Depends on how many babies are born. No.
As a point of clarification, in court, I'm aware of no specific group right here, right now, though, that is planning on launching.
Yeah, and I
such
think
an
I
initiative.
was asking for your intent in it too, in knowing what the council's thinking. But I suppose that's.
We'll see where this lands. I will say this. I do appreciate council's time. I'm a bit disappointed.
Okay,
but,
wait a second. Are you through, Councilmember Olson?
No, go ahead, finish
Okay.
out.
I do appreciate council time and giving me the audience on this. I am disappointed, but we'll move forward, such is the will of council. Thank you.
I think one of the other things that I haven't really said is that and maybe this is an issue of timing and how long someone's on council, is that we really need someone who can lead meetings well. And that's a lot of what this is. And citizens don't know that. They think it's probably, kissing babies or whatever, which are the sort of the kind of normal caricatures of mayors. But so that's what I worry about most, is get somebody who can just keep us together, keep us moving forward. And there's always going to be conflict. So I think that's where people misunderstand what our mayor and mayor pro tem do here.
Absolutely. Thank
And
you.
some people who've been mayor take on more power and gravitas with it all beyond maybe what they should do or should have done. And that's why I keep thinking we got to keep thanking the two over there for doing their jobs, because they keep us really solvent and going forward. But anyway, that's it. Enough said.
I disagree with Councilmember Olson. I do not believe that we came to any agreement to move this forward. I believe what we came to agreement was to go ahead and honor our city manager's request that we at least have some knowledge base of what's going on with this
Fully taken,
as
yep.
as a council request for information on what she's kind of already started, so that if it happens, we at least have some information to provide to the citizens, as well as being a little bit more aware of educating them on exactly how our government works, and that we don't really truly have a mayor. We have a president of council, and they function and, have to sign papers and do stuff on behalf of us. But I think that's all he was requesting. I don't think that turned it into that we're moving this forward.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted
But we're
clarification.
moving forward with information, which I think is really critical too, but I do
Right.
think we haven't dropped it. It's
Right.
not dropped yet.
Well, and I think we do
Okay,
need that
no,
information.
no, I mean, we either have consensus to move this forward or not. I think.
We do. We have consensus not to move this forward.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted clarity.
Okay. With that said, we will move on.
I have watched council meetings lately that have ended, soon.
No, we're going to do policy.
No.
It's not ending soon. It won't be too long.
You bet.
I'm jealous of a few other councils. Shh, don't
don't talk about it, then it might happen.
Yeah.
What?
It's the curse of the talking about it.
I'm
Good
making
evening.
you sad. I'm sorry.
Hello, Mr. Wolf.
Good evening, Mr. Wolf.
Happy to be back. This is the Council Policies Procedure presentation dated the 22nd of January, so I will go to where we left off and see how far we can get tonight. So you'll remember this slide. We talked a lot about the issue of 3 council members at a board or commission meeting and how to notice that. I'll just note that we didn't get consensus on exactly how to do that, just so that we need to know how to do that. And then there's the separate issue of water and sewer board. So I'm just going to table that. We spent a lot of time last time we had a chance to talk about this on that particular issue. And I'll go to that second bullet point and just jump right into another easy one to talk about is future agenda items. So I mentioned this a while back that one of our concerns is with off-agenda topics. And there's really 2 main areas where off-agenda topics come. One is in council member response to public comment for items not on the agenda that evening, and 2 is under council member choice. So our concern is that the public, and the reason you post meetings, I'm not trying to lecture, but the reason that there's an agenda that's posted to the public is that so they have reasonable notification as to what will be discussed and what may be decided by the council or any other board or commission. And so the concern with responding to general public comment, I think thanking somebody for coming, I mean, obviously that's fine, but it's the appearance that you're discussing something of substance that may be that the council may be taking action on in the future without there being reasonable notice of that topic being on the agenda. I think you could probably make the argument under open meetings law, I would defer to the city attorney's office on this, that if a member of the public says they're going to speak on something and that topic is posted on the agenda and you have a discussion about that particular topic, that's one thing. But I'm talking about random subjects that come up based on a member of the public addressing you. Same thing with council member choice, again, without there being a specific notice of what the topic is, and then you engage in some discussion, and even sometimes, and I won't list specific times, there's been a decision made based off of whatever that council member choice topic is. And so the suggested process, and I believe we do outline this in the current proposed draft policy manual, is a process where we just have that notification that if there, for council member choice specifically, that if you wanted to discuss something in substance at a council meeting under council member choice, then you just notify the city manager's office to place that agenda, or the city clerk's office to place that under your council member choice on the agenda in advance of the meeting. And then for responses to public comment, that if it's not noted on the agenda in some way, it's not on the agenda that evening, or it's not noted by a member of the public speaking, that you simply request for it to be on a future, on the next meeting, or a study session, or at the next regular council meeting, whatever it might be.
Can you tell us where that is
Yeah.
in the current policy manual? I mean, the current draft?
On the, I think it's the latest draft that has this blue cover on it. It should be dated the November 13th, 2017. It is on page 13 at the bottom, section F, number 3.
Mayor Pro Tem, may I pardon myself for one moment?
Yes.
I'm on page 13, and it's about excusal during meeting.
How about that?
At the top. So I must have the wrong.
Was it at the bottom? What did you say?
So I do have that blue version, if that's what you all are looking at, the
Yes.
light blue version.
That.
Okay. We'll get there, one way or another.
13.
That's on page 10, at the bottom of the page.
Here we go.
Off-agenda topics, okay. It's on page 10 for me, too.
So is our meeting paused?
I think we can go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
So, oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, a second.
So, we're talking about, yeah, I mean, it's this item, response to public comment. I had someone, actually a couple different people, tell me that they thought we were way out of line with sunshine rules during our public comment time, that we collect evidence during this time, especially those that are unscheduled. We go back and forth, sometimes unexpectedly, because we ask them a question and then it goes back and forth. And I thought, wow, I never really actually thought about that. So I mean, I think that's what you're talking about here. And I don't know, City Attorney Brown, what you are thinking about. It does seem to me like we've bordered. I feel sometimes like we've set ourselves up as judges up here, and we're making all these decisions, and I don't feel comfortable with that at all. I don't ever want to stop people from being able to come and say what they want to say. It's more on our end that I'm worried about. We've entered into some things sometimes that are not necessarily great.
I've had to deal with multiple councils on this issue because you are politicians. And when someone brings a problem to you, you immediately want to solve it. That's the nature of what you do in this role. But under Open Meetings Act, when you set an agenda, what you're doing, the purpose of an agenda is to create transparency so that everyone in the community knows what it is you're going to address. If someone comes forward during public comment period and they bring forth an issue that the governing body wants to respond to, I believe under Open Meetings Act that a member of the council can ask for a consensus to have it placed on the next agenda, and that way it's noticed to the public. And the council is not put in the position of responding to something that's brought forth to them when they haven't had a chance to, number one, get all the members of the community forward who may have an opinion on that, and number two, find out what information staff already has on that particular subject. So I think that in order to conform to the Open Meetings Act, that there should not be response to matters brought before the council during public comment until a following meeting.
And that includes asking questions? Because that's usually where it prompts it.
I've always advised governing bodies not to start the issue with asking questions, because by asking the question, you're starting the discussion, and people are not in the room who may want to participate. If you do have questions, though, I think that's absolutely appropriate during council's choice or whenever to make a request for consensus to have that put on a future agenda. It lets the individual who brought it forward know that they've caught the attention of council, as well as notifying everybody else that they have the opportunity to speak.
This is what the couple of people that have been watching have said to me. They think it's really, we should not be asking those questions. We can make our comments later when we have the comments, and we should not be entering into any kind of possible conversation or looking like we're having a conversation about an issue someone brings up, because it's really cutting others out.
So does that mean we
don't ask those questions anymore?
Do we respond to public comment then?
After they're all done. I mean, that's the way we used to do it, but I'm the one who introduced the questions, so nobody stopped me.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
And that's the way that it used to get done. And then there was pushback, and people didn't like it because everybody sat up there like stoic little statues, not responding to the public and not looking like they were engaged at all. Like, you know, they're like, you're not going to do anything? You're not going to talk? But they were frustrated. And so I kind of understood why it ended up going, again, somewhat anecdotally and somewhat of a knee-jerk reaction. It went all the way, kind of the other way, where it's this kind of open.
I don't think it was a knee-jerk.
I'm sorry.
I do.
I mean, I think that it was in response to situations that were going on at the time. And so it went back. It's difficult to, and you may not have had that experience, to sit in that audience and watch 7 people sit up there staring and not say anything in response to what's going on. And it's frustrating, I believe, for the council probably at times as well. And the previous mayor made it very clear that he wanted that opportunity to I mean, he promoted it pretty openly to go ahead and make sure that that conversation piece was moved along. I mean, probably more than maybe it should have been. But I'm a little concerned because now I've heard a couple of councils. Most recently, I listened to a Littleton City Council meeting where they specifically brought this up, and where the open meetings law is being used to stop people from kind of participating and limiting what, and kind of going back the other way, kind of using it now as a little bit of a hammer to limit some of that, what people thought it was kind of opening up more transparency and conversation. I wouldn't object to the, I can see where we kind of go down a bad road with too much discussion, and once that happens, you have to participate, because I don't want to be one of the council people up there that's not engaging the public. You can't have, like what we were doing before, everybody did that, and so then you have to kind of get into the fray because we are political and we are representing people. If we have a policy where we're not going to do that, then I would like to go ahead and have some kind of opportunity for us to at least address the questions prior to making them wait for 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 hours till we get to council member choice, and expect, because that was the biggest frustration, is that you tell people, wait till council member choice, and then people can respond to what you said. And then 4 hours later, 3 hours later, they're sitting there going, when are they going to ever? I would still at least want that piece if we're going to bring something forward or do a council member choice or ask questions that'll be, or put this on the agenda, because this is also a method of us putting stuff on the agenda. It cannot just be, and that's why Robert's Rules of Order is set up. That's why we've got certain the way that this is set up is that we have the power then to go ahead and make sure that things are brought forward, including motions, even if it's not on the agenda. We have the ability to do that now. And that's our ability to govern and to represent. So I do want to be careful about just making blanket and making it so overreaching that we go back to just looking like 7 stoic little chess pieces up there and not responding to our constituents, but also trying to limit a little bit of because we don't just do it to ourselves. We constantly engage these two and go, I'm right, aren't I? I can do this, can't I? And it's like we're putting them on a spot because we want to go ahead and get something done, and I want to try and move us back from doing that as well, because you guys haven't had an opportunity to think about it and talk about it. So I still want to be able to put something on an agenda. I want to make sure that we can have some kind of response, at least to say this is why I'd like to see this come forward, put this on the agenda for the next meeting, so that it's noticed. I do think it's fair to make sure that the public has more, a broader notification to the public that this issue is coming up. But we've got to be able to say something, because it was just, that's exactly why we ended up where we're at, was because it was just too frustrating for people on both sides of that dais to deal with this. So how we mix that, I'm not quite sure.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Wink.
Thank you. I agree. I think we should follow the law, and I think that this is an Why is that funny?
Just because one of our goals is
I love that goal. We currently are, by the way. We're not following the law now.
And so,
go ahead, Cheryl.
Finish?
Oh, well.
Okay. And so, I feel that based on everything that's been discussed on this point, it seems like we have a perfect opportunity to educate our our public, our citizens. If we've made a change and the appearance is that there's 7 of us stoically sitting, looking, and completely zipped shut, then we have a wonderful opportunity to share and just educate. It's simple education. We have many means and ways to educate them, so let them know. This is the office, according to Open Meetings Act, blah, blah, blah. We've decided this. This is how this portion of our meetings will go. And then I think I do feel that it's good to thank them, and I think the mayor has that opportunity in a general way to acknowledge them and thank them for coming forward, because I know it feels lonely sometimes and it takes some courage. But I think we should address them, but not in the detail of what they're saying, and I do think it's absolutely fantastic for us then, during council members' choice, to then try and garner consensus if we do want to put a certain agenda item on an upcoming agenda. And I will say to one of the points Councilmember Barentine said, this could be an opportunity for us to limit the amount of time the public comment individuals have to wait for council member comments. It doesn't have to take 4 or 5 hours to get to that point in the meetings. Wink, wink. Perhaps we could work on getting there within 20 minutes, and then they don't have to wait so long, and, just
20 minutes?
Just saying.
Wow. Boy, you're new. Thank you.
It's a suggestion.
All right. Would you be against, just as a question, would you be against a council choice being right after the public comment then? Instead of at the end of the meeting was kind of what I was suggesting.
Oh.
Oh.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to.
It
was a point of information.
Oh, okay.
Let me think about that, and I'll comment later.
Alison.
Actually, I wanted to make the same type of suggestion that Councilmember Barentine just made, and that is that the agenda of the City Council is part of your policy manual, and it lists as Item 6, scheduled public comment. Item 7 is unscheduled public comment. Don't ask me the page. I don't have the blue book. But it seems to me that Item 6 could be public comment, subsection A, scheduled public comment, subsection B, unscheduled public comment, and subsection C, council review of comments and requests for putting issues on future agendas.
Yep.
That would happen right then and there, and you don't have to, you still get your council communication, because council communication is a pretty big deal. That's when you bring a lot of stuff back from the community. And I don't think you want to lose the public comment thoughts within all the rest of the things that you need to discuss. So anyway, that's a suggestion for addressing Councilmember Barentine's issues and concerns, and also keeping council members' choice down at the bottom. Did that make sense?
Okay. So you will put that in the new draft?
I am redrafting as you speak.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Martinez. And I know Councilmember Olson had hers up first, but she spoke once already.
Sorry. I didn't bring my hard copy because I didn't actually think we were going to finally get to talk about this time.
Oh, ye of little faith!
Well, it goes to my point. So my question is about suggested process or for future agenda items. So I'm concerned with kind of how some items have gotten on the agenda. For example, tonight, one council member mentioned at one meeting, we should talk about this. And then all of a sudden it was on our agenda tonight. And for example, the policies and procedures have been pushed off for like 3-4 months. And so I'm wondering how we can better go about putting things on the agenda and prioritizing those. I feel like those are things that we normally do by consensus. We all know, or at least the majority of us want to talk about something, so that's how it makes it onto the agenda. In this case, it didn't happen. And in this case, it seemed a little bit like also unusual that it gets on the agenda so quick, and then one council member is responsible for providing us the information we are to consider. That also seems very abnormal. I don't think that's happened since I've been on council. So just kind of wondering about the process for things getting on the agenda and how we go about deciding what goes on when.
Okay.
Because I've been frustrated that we haven't talked about this. We're still talking about the policies and procedures, and we've been since the new members arrived.
November.
And
Absolutely. I hear that.
And we already set aside, an hour to talk about this, and this is last without even any time allotment. So I'm just kind
But
of.
I don't think we ended up spending an hour talking about it. I think
But
there
still,
wasn't
it's
an
the
hour.
point. It's the
Yes,
principle that we don't even allot time for this. It's just at the end when
Right.
we have time.
Right.
And I think it's important enough to be on the agenda. So just more of a question for the council. How do we go about deciding what goes on the agenda and what gets priority?
Okay. Is that in the policy manual? Okay. All right.
It's in
Thank
the
you.
slide deck.
It's
in the slide deck.
slide
Okay.
deck.
All right. Thank you.
So-
Councilmember Olson.
I feel a little bit like I hijacked the meeting by asking this question, but I do think it's one of the things that makes me the most nervous about our meetings in there is the interaction and what we're doing, whether or not we're following the open meeting laws and setting ourselves up and the citizens up for things. One of the reasons why this came up for me is a citizen wanted to complain about something, and I said, you can always call me. And like, well, I thought I had to come to a city council meeting to talk about. They're like, we have now set our citizens up to think they have to come to a city council meeting to say the light is out in my, no. So no, you don't have to do that. But I think that's what they're hearing from other people. Like, go to the city council and tell them what you think. Like, yes, do, but not for like everything, So I'm worried a little bit about over expecting for people in that time. I like the idea of doing the scheduled and the unscheduled, making our comments to then put them on something else, move on, do our regular business, and then at the end do council requests. Because things come up in the course of the discussion for some of the decisions we make that I then start to add as well onto my list that I come in with, if I come in with one. So I would prefer it to be that way. When we made the switch, and I was integral to that because I was one of those who sat out and watched, and I remember the first time presenting for something in my neighborhood, and I'm looking at them like, respond to me. It was the worst for a communication person to sit there like, can't you? But, I just wasn't in the right mind. Of course they don't respond. That's not what happens at these meetings, but you just are up there thinking that. So I think whatever we can do to inform people, and I think we did. We started to we read, I think 6-7 years ago, we created a little preamble to everything we do, but we can do that again. I think it's important for people to know, that we're not going to have a discussion and that they know what's happening next. And you've done that. You've continued that on the tradition. So,
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Wink, did you have yours up before Councilmember Barentine?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
believe her.
She only gets to vote? No, that's okay.
It worked.
I just thought it was funny. Sure.
So I have a point of information or a couple of points of information that pertain in large part to what Member Martinez shared with us. So in regard to items presenting themselves or on the agenda, if council, is it not correct that if council as a whole wants to discuss a certain item, wants a certain item on our agenda, we can ask it of, I believe, you and the city manager.
Yes.
Otherwise, how do items really, do I call you or the city? I mean, for example,
either one,
what has
correct?
been happening? Do I call and say, I would like to talk about tree skirts for the next holiday party? And how does it happen?
Well, this is a little bit off topic, but that is how it happens, and let's address that during council member choice. Although you probably, you're asking questions. I think she had answers.
And I have let me ask my other question, and then we can decide how you want. Yeah. So, also, we have on page 14 of the blue version, just a couple of points ahead of, never mind, that. Item number 15 on that page, it says presentation of last minute information.
Agenda materials?
Yes.
Okay.
Presentation of last minute information should be avoided whenever possible. So when I arrive at a council meeting, I read that in great detail back in November, and I believed it to say, or to indicate that I shouldn't get anything that wasn't in my packet on Thursday or Wednesday. I should be able to read and study all of it, because sometimes, you're flipping through things on the fly and you're going to miss things. The citizens who are engaged can't look at it ahead of time.
Right.
Are we loose on that? Are we?
No, we're not loose on that, and that is.
For example, tonight I had to talk
Yes.
about the mayoral election, and I had to gulp it down quite quickly.
Right, and that did violate the policy. And is this in our current policy?
It's the Rita rule.
I had nothing to do with that.
When you drive, Rick.
There you go.
All right, thank you. Point taken. Councilmember Barentine.
You got to be careful, because the biggest offender of that is staff. And we have had, in the 5-6 meetings that you've been to already, we've had numerous people come and give us material. And if we're going to follow that, then we would need to sit there and tell some presenter, like the stuff that we got for the finance, the people. I mean, it's happened at least 5 or 6 times since you've been elected.
I've seen it.
So, and part of the reason that we want to make sure that we try very hard to adhere to that is exactly the reasons that you gave. I mean, people need to have some, first and foremost is that you want the public to be able to have access to it. But it happens. It does happen. I'm not going to, nor do I wish for this particular issue to be vented on Councilmember Cuesta, because the biggest offenders are staff and other presenters that come in. So I'm not trying to single him out tonight at all.
No.
Also, how it got put on the agenda and I went back for the meeting is we put it on the dais. He brought it up on the dais, asked for it to be put on. We all sat there, shook our head, and said, yes, we'd like to have a study session and talk about this. That's exactly what happened. And we all agreed at the time. Now, maybe we were all just trying to be polite, and we forgot that was, but what we do in that room in public matters. So I'm not going to.
I definitely didn't agree to that, to this.
I'm not going to thing up, but you might want to go back and listen before you commit yourself too much. When we're up there talking about different ideas, and I am trying to just get away from beating up on what kind of looks a little like we're beating up on him. I don't think that he skirted the process. I don't think that he did anything inappropriate. I think he brought it up in public and asked us, and that's how it got there. I don't think he got any kind of special treatment or that this pushed anything aside. We all have issues that we think are important, and one of the reasons that got brought up that night was because there was a time sensitivity that was brought up that if we were going to do anything and put something onto the ballot, that it had to be done in a manner with the timeline that the city clerk had in order to go ahead and make it worthwhile. Otherwise, it wasn't worthwhile to talk about it if we were pushed it so far down the road that we wouldn't be able to meet the timelines. And so that issue came up in it too. So in giving one of our council members some grace on this, I think that if there was any confusion on where it led, I believe that it was, I heard the meeting, you can go back and listen to it, but I think it was not an untoward thing that happened with this being discussed, and I'm glad we discussed it. I'm glad it got discussed. Because if we had decided to go ahead and move this forward, then we would feel pretty stupid if we were doing it in such a rushed manner because we had not done it more timely. I was a little confused by what you had said about the meeting. Were you agreeing that you wanted to, Councilmember Olson, still have 2 sections where we were able to respond, one right after public comment, and then have council member choice like the city attorney had brought
Yes.
forward? Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
So we respond, we have a comment time well, the other option is to have to wait till the end of the meeting, which I think is really rude.
Okay.
And so
I just wasn't clear about that when you had,
I'm
when you
saying
had spoke.
separate them, keep it separate, comments to the public, and I think we should.
So you're still looking at just having two like we currently kind of have?
Yeah, although if there's
Okay.
another way to do it, I'm willing to entertain it. What I don't want
No,
to
I
do is
didn't
have us
think
make
so. I just wanted to know if that's
decisions.
what you were saying.
Yeah.
Point of information. So, given staff, as well as some of us, provide information at meetings that wasn't in our packet, could this be another education? I mean, part of the issue is that we're still making final decisions to our changes in the policy, right?
Right.
So if we haven't nailed down or made final decisions, then there are individuals that maybe aren't certain where we are. But it seems to me another pretty blatant opportunity to just share the information and educate and update individuals on the change, both staff
Well, I said, and I want to just clarify while I'm giving up the floor here is that I am in no way disagreeing with that. The public needs to have that information. We have had some contentious issues occasionally when somebody was presenting and bringing stuff forward and go, it wasn't in your packet or this was a late thing, and we try to give a little bit of grace, I think, to staff and presenters, and then the staff has worked very hard to make sure that it becomes part of the official record and is put in there. But I think the goal, like what you're saying, what I agree with this policy, I think the goal is not to do it. I agree with that. The goal is to not do it. However, if there is some late breaking news that makes such a difference to it, I don't think we as a council are going to sit there and go, no, I don't want it. But we're supposed to be not doing it for the public and for our own sake as well. So that, I'm not disagreeing with that piece.
And it does say here, unless there's new information related to an emergency situation, like late breaking news or something.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody who presents thinks they have an emergency
There's that. There's that.
Okay, thank you. And just in response to what Councilmember Barentine shared also, the city manager is constantly taking notes. I am actually taking some notes. And so I did have it on the bottom of my notes after last week for the very reason that Councilmember Barentine shared, that it was time sensitive and that, so it's not, we'll talk about how things get on the agenda, I mean, as it comes up also, but that is part of how it gets on. When we're sitting there discussing, we do that. So this is the next thing?
One more slide in between, and then yes, it is.
Okay.
It is on there. So I think we got some direction on that. Thank you for that discussion. It is an important item. So 3 non-controversial items follow. Proposed new policies that are currently in your draft, mostly towards the end of the document. One is clarifying the use of discretionary funds for council members. Most notably, it defines that no constituent mailings will take place 90 days within an election. Council vacancies and memorializes a policy for you in case it happens again. And then telephonic participation. I'm not going to step on that one. But the highlights are that it provides guidelines for participation, occasional use only. I think this policy says 1 time per year. Not allowed for quasi-judicial or executive functions of this council. And it must be requested 3 days in advance so it can be noticed. So that's the policy that our city attorney's offices have drafted for you. Those 3 are currently in your draft policy.
What page is that?
Your discretionary funds, which one were you looking for?
Yeah, we can start with discretionary funds.
Discretionary is on page 15, policy number 6, and then towards the very end of the document, policy 10 and 11 on page 21 and 22 are your council vacancies and telephonic participation.
And that's for regular meetings, right? Not for study sessions.
Telephonic?
Yeah. Because we've had, it doesn't specify, because I know we've had in the past people do study sessions, call in. We had a member that was actually bedridden but could be talking and called in.
Yeah, you would have to specify if you were more flexible for study sessions.
So
What do we think?
I would like to wait on discussing these three, because I know in a couple of these are new policies. There were some changes in these that I would like to deal with, but I'm thinking we should wait until the next meeting to go ahead and discuss these, or do you want to?
I mean, stop here.
Yeah, do you want to stop here, or do you want to move on?
Stop here. We got an
Okay.
option. I'm stopping here.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a long discussion on my part. I'll just warn you ahead of time. I have a lot of problems with all three of these issues. Well, no, not the middle issue, with number 1 and number 3. And I think that we need to, when we're putting in new policies, have as robust a conversation as possible. And we are not going to after 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Can I formally request that it gets on our next study session?
It may not be the next one because it's the 1 hour. It's just the 1 hour, but the one after that.
Whatever our next available
Yes.
time,
Study
so this
session,
doesn't keep
study
getting
session.
kicked down the road and it's a year later.
Well,
and
the
that's
truth is it hasn't been kicked down the road that far. I mean, we didn't get started on it at first, but the 12th of
That will
March.
be the next study session, Mayor.
We'll say
Okay.
the next slide is about it.
No, we have
Clarifying
a
your
study
agenda
session
set.
next week.
The 5th. Yeah, the 5th, but that's.
It's the next time where it's the full study.
Oh, I see what
Yeah,
you're
full
saying.
study session,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that the final slide?
No.
Okay, it's on there anyway already,
Carter's
isn't it?
birthday.
The 5th?
12.
About it since we brought up the agenda setting?
Are we going to stop here, or are there some
No, there's
low-hanging
a
fruit?
couple other things on the, we have council members' choice and,
Oh. But we're stopping here with this. I think we were wondering about so if items 1 and 3 or bullets, major bullets 1 and 3 would take a bit more time. For example, in Mr. Woulf's next slide, perhaps it's something we could, but yeah.
Yeah, no. It's not going to be. Because the issues that got brought up tonight, it's not the first time it's happened for things that are more serious, so it's going to be a conversation as well.
there is room on the 12th, right, to make sure that. There is now. Okay. Okay, I think we should wait.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How many times you've come up already? We worked you hard enough, and you already had all these
I'll be ready next
going
time.
on. Poor thing.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Could I ask a favor? Would you re-email the one with the blue front on it? I want to make sure I thought I had
The
the
new
right
one.
one. I'm finding it,
Yeah,
but
Me too.
I just must have mixed them up.
Yeah,
If
the
you could
the
re-email
last
it.
time we attached it, I'll just make
Must
sure you
have
get
just-
the latest version.
Okay, that'd be great.
Actually, I don't even
I don't even have one on.
Yeah,
I don't
that has
think
not
the
been updated.
paper copy, I don't think we got the paper copy of the new.
Not this time. Yeah, our apologies
Okay.
for that.
Okay.
But it was not changed from the last time it was on the study
Yeah.
session.
Okay,
I just have
All
one
right.
with me.
thank you. Okay, council members' choice, who would like to begin? Councilmember Barentine.
I really want to thank the police on how they've been handling the homeless issue going on the 4300 block of Broadway. It has gotten out of hand. Somebody has pulled a gun. There have been knives. There have been fights. There has been a business owner who's been attacked, and it's causing problems for the businesses down there. And we have to figure out how we're going to deal with this. One of the things that the previous council did for the day labor places when they had problems with people congregating and creating an atmosphere that seemed unsafe at times was to go ahead and insist that the day labor places have to have their employees congregate in the back so that they weren't in the forefront. We had it over at was at Bates, where the liquor store is, and then it used to be a service center, but it used to be a day labor place right next to the liquor place, and that was a huge blowout with all of that, a few years right when I had gotten on council the first time. And so they don't do that. Right across the street is a day labor place. It's not causing any problem to any other business there. And we've got, I've got over 30 people that were there last night, and I talked to some of them. I've got women in that line waiting to go ahead and get into a warm place to stay, and they don't feel safe. And they're hiding off in the back, trying to stay away from the group. Then you've got people that are drunk or on drugs or having problems that are causing rifts there and making the other people feel unsafe. So it's not like everybody there is a problem, but they're being kind of all lumped in with this. There has to be some kind of addressing to this situation so that we can make those businesses safe. People can go ahead and conduct business and go in and out of there, and that the people in that line, that is cruel. That is how unhumane of us to encourage people to come down in that kind of mass and then make them wait for hours on a sidewalk. That's not good for them either. And then they're getting into fights and other issues are happening and drug deals are going down that are making some of the people that are just in a bad situation looking for some help. It's unsafe for them too. So I feel for the situation the police are in with this. But when you talk to somebody, that woman I talked to last night was 76 years old. And she's just trying to stay warm. You fall on a hard time, but she doesn't want to be in the mix of these people. Who's watching them and who's keeping guard? I have no other problem with any of the other facilities that do food banks along Broadway. I have a huge stretch of Broadway on my district. I have Hope that has a food bank several times a week. I have Mosaic Church that does it right on Broadway, and the Methodist Church. And they don't have any of these problems. They have people there that are helping to keep what seems to be a much better culture. I have no idea why this is so contentious, and it's been going on now for more than a year. So we need to have, I'd like to do at least a council request to find out what's going on, why they're not, why they're not opening their doors sooner. One, after they check people in, why are they kicking them back out to the street to go ahead and wait for the transportation? Why aren't they allowed to stay inside? Are there some zoning rules or something else that's causing a specific problem there? I went to the food bank a couple of times at Hope and volunteered, and those people run a tight ship, and nobody messes around. Nobody causes any problems, and it seems to be that the culture that they've created there, same as at Mosaic Church or the Methodist Church, they create a culture there of mutual respect, and they expect people to behave, and they are respectful to them. That's not happening down there. This is getting out of hand, and even the people who are trying to get the services, they're not safe, and it breaks my heart to see especially women, especially an elderly woman sitting in a line and she doesn't feel safe. What are we doing to them? That's not a very kind thing to do on the other end either. It certainly isn't good for the businesses, and it isn't good for the culture of that community down there. They're not used to having things handled this way. They're very generous in my district. They're very compassionate people, and they support the churches down there, and they support the food banks. I have 5 or 6 food banks in my district. People have shown me the list. They're very happy to help. But to have this one causing this much problem we've got to figure out why and whether there's anything we can do to help the businesses and the people that are looking for these services. And then another check on the hotels as well down there. I've been having some additional conversations with homeless people the vouchers that they're getting. There's no reason, it is not kind or compassionate to give somebody a voucher to put them in a place where there are rats, where there are a space under a door. I said, how did the rats get in there? And they go, duh, there's a space. I go, what do you mean? There's just a space in the door. I went and looked. So the vermin just walk right in. It's not like there's anything to stop them. There are things that can be done to go ahead if we are going to go ahead and provide services for people. Then we have to respect them enough to make sure that we put them in places that are safe and clean, and that's just uncalled for. A few door sweeps at Home Depot would have at least taken care of the big problem where the big rat can get in. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. These people make money. There's $70, $80, some of them $90 a night for these places. I mean, you could go to Holiday Express for $65. Now, they're not going to take people with vouchers, but if they're going to be a for-profit business, then they need to follow the law and the rules and make sure that the people are safe. And there is nothing kind or compassionate to give somebody a voucher and put them in a place like that. Some of them looked pretty good driving down Broadway at 35 miles an hour, but when I started going up and walking around, I was like, they're right. What are they doing? So if we could just have a little bit of an update on what's going on. And it seems like one of them is getting the vouchers and the other one is, so all three, I think Hilltop is gone. I don't have to worry about that one anymore, but all of them, because one seems to get all the vouchers, and then when I have done my Saturday night, late night walk down Broadway again, there are businesses and there are facilities that are trying to be compassionate, that are starting to allow some of these people to sleep in their back, in their alley, in their window wells, in their by their dumpsters, and they're trying to be compassionate. They think they're being compassionate, but we can't do that. I mean, we can't do that either. So we're going to have to address this in a little bit better way that helps everybody out. So then I've got businesses complaining about another business guy who allows the homeless guys to sleep by his dumpster. I get what the guy's trying to do, but I have to also respect the other business owner who says, I don't want that. My employees don't want that. They don't want to come to work, and they've got people sleeping in the alley. It's not what I invested in and not what I brought in, and they both have a point. So we're going to have to take a little bit of a look. I would like to also request some kind of feedback report from the task force that was put up. We've not gotten a report back from what they're doing or what their mission was and what goals were set up and how we're doing on all that sort of. So I'm not asking for it now.
No, they're going to come next week.
Okay.
They signed up for 5 minutes next week, change the trend.
So we need to have a little bit more. I don't know why, especially this one block is having that much problem, but if we could address that. And then I wanted to thank the city manager for putting the information together on what had happened a little bit more on the plat and agreeing that, if something like, if we do another push like that, that we have a little bit more
quicker
notification on what's going on. I have now signed up officially. They don't want to call the police. The businesses down there, the bar down there doesn't want it against their license. So, and I've got, they've all decided now they could call the ret. I don't know what all 5-4 of me is going to do stomping down there, but I promised them I will call the police then. Then I will make the complaint. And I'll go ahead and try and start looking at how we deal with this, because they are so frustrated on both sides of all of this. And quite honestly, the homeless people are very frustrated as well. They really are very annoyed at the representation of some people causing problems and causing all of them problems, but they're the ones who are unsafe. They're the ones who are in the midst of this, and we seem to be kind of sanctioning them. I'm frustrated. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm done.
Councilmember Martinez, do you have anything?
Yeah, I have two things. I enjoyed our discussion with planning and zoning, and I would like to see about having another joint session with them on ADUs and the short-term rentals. I know they did a lot of work on that, and I want them to know that we appreciate all the work they did, and if they want to share more information with us, I think we should have a joint session with them before we vote on either of those topics, if they're up for it. And then we had the E3 Summit last week, and want to thank everybody who worked on that, all the staff and all the community support and our partners with Excel. So we talked about, and thank you, Councilmember Wake, for coming. We also talked about some of our accomplishments so far. So just as a reminder, our goal overall was to reduce our energy consumption 1% every year from, I think, 2016 or 17 to 2030, and with the different sectors, residential, commercial, and municipal. So far with residential, we've reduced it by 1.5%. Commercial has been reduced by 2%, and municipal has been reduced by 6.5%. So that translates to a lot of money saved and a lot of energy saved, so that was really exciting. We had probably about 20 or 30 folks from the community there, I would say, and they cheered and clapped and hooted and hollered when we talked about the biogas project. There was a lot of support for that. They were really excited. So I'll share that updated presentation with council so you can see a little bit more of what was talked about. And Councilmember Wink talked about the breakout sessions there, and we broke out in those different sectors, and then the groups just brainstormed and then shared with the whole group some new ideas. And I think what they came up with was really great. So I really enjoyed the event. And again, thanks for everybody who came to support that and for all staff efforts on that. So thank you.
Thank you for your update. Councilmember Wink?
No report.
Councilmember Olson?
Oh, my goodness. I wanted to pick up on the homeless thing. It would be nice to have a time more than 5 minutes of an update in there. If we're expecting them to be one of the groups of people that's addressing this, it would be nice to have a conversation about what can we do differently. But I'm assuming that the community policing, that our, what do we call it?
Impact team.
Impact team is working with them. Is there maybe some update from them that we could get that would give us some perception of what, is there something more we need to be doing to back them up in something? Is there, I don't know what it is. Yeah,
That's a good idea. I'd like to hear from them. I think that's a good idea.
And then in that light, if we do have them come, I did really like meeting with P&Z last week. I hesitate to bring this up because I don't want to be negative, but I felt really awful about how we treated them. And I don't want to ever be in a place where we're reading them the charter or telling them how to have meetings. I think they took it really somewhat offensively. I think by the end it got better. But I would like us to think through when we're going to have a group here, what is the way we're going to handle it? If we have a problem with them, let's be really clear about it, but not, not just read things to them. Let's crystallize from us. What do we want to get with them about, so that we're communicating clearly that we respect them? And I think it was a mixed message to begin with. So if we do invite this, impact, but the task force, is that what it's called?
Change the trend.
That we know why we're having them here, because I don't want to be beating on them either, saying, what are you doing, because they're a volunteer group that's trying to do some things, but I would like to have a conversation with them that finds out what are we doing that are meeting both of our desires and needs. And then rats. We had a rat in our garage. So rats get in every little way they can, but I have been doing a little bit of research, and then back in November and December when I was in Belize, I learned a lot about barn owls, and barn owls are natural to almost every habitat in the entire world, which is really cool. And a couple of communities are finding that if they introduce the barn owl into some neighborhoods, you have to figure out how many you can have per capita or what geography. That might be a way that we deal with this overpopulation of rats that we have.
Hopefully they don't take away the
They
cats.
eat rats?
They do. They eat rats.
They eat other things too.
They do chickens, and I don't know if they do chickens, but there's got to be a balance. So I think a whole community in Florida used owls. They were in Miami area, and urban areas are now having to deal with it. So we might want to look into the state and ask, maybe there's just one barn owl that's the Englewood barn owl. That I don't know, but you can have it by my house.
Can I have a quick point of information? Is that okay? Regarding the rats, how long have they been a problem? Such a problem in Englewood.
They're all over the metro area.
They have,
But you know,
There was an article a couple of years ago, a year ago, that Denver was one of the top 5 cities for rats.
Mm-hmm.
Part of
Denver
the
Metro.
meetings that I went to, they said that the rats, there were a lot of issues. One of them was the construction that had happened in Denver, and I had never considered that all of the upheaval kind of drug them, pushed them out of where they were living and out of their habitat. The other one was when they did the sewers for the High Line, and apparently there were people in apartments that actually saw them coming out of the sewers. So there was a mix of things. Then there was also composting and the push for that. So
and chickens.
Significantly lower this year than it was last year. Part of it is.
I didn't mean to open a whole new thing.
No, I know.
Can of worms of rats.
Okay.
But
she
moving
did.
On.
But there was movement toward that last year that we did, and it has significantly reduced. However, part of that is because some natural predators, back to Councilmember Olson's point, came back into the area as well. That was raccoons and some coyotes. And apparently they love rats.
I'm done.
Let's move on.
I'm done. Thank you.
Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. Yes, the first thing that I have is the memorial wall over at EHS is down to the final days in which somebody can place an order to have a brick engraved before their presentation, which I believe is in May. And I will be having my District 4 open forum tomorrow morning, this room, at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Tomorrow morning at 6 p.m.
Tomorrow evening.
I'm like, good for you. Oh, p.m. Okay.
6 p.m. This room. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Other point.
Brief?
Yes.
Okay.
I do not want the meeting with the planning and zoning just to be done by one council member. I have had complaints for the last year that there are some bullying behavior by some of the members of that planning and zoning board and concerns about staff. There were issues that were brought to this council from the members of planning and zoning on why their meetings were being canceled. The interpretation that there was anything to planning and zoning was inappropriate, and it was a narrative that was only done by a couple of people that was at this meeting. The other council board members, I believe, more than understood, especially from my conversations with them afterwards, that we were talking about their authority and not having staff run that. I think it's always a good idea for all of us, including this council, to be reminded what the charter says, what the authority is, what our documents say, and what the law says. And I think that that's very important that they knew that what we were asking from them was grounded in law. So I have a totally different take than Councilmember Olson, and I was actually just taken aback that anybody during that meeting would go ahead and start apologizing for that when I didn't think that's what was going on at all. And I've had very specific complaints about the way other members on that board are being treated by other members, and I think it was very important for us to go ahead and make sure that they understood we were standing behind them.
I appreciate that. And just in closing, I have gotten some feedback from some of the planning and zoning members, and it was a very encouraging meeting to me to understand how things could have been different had we worked together in the past, but how it really can be going forward from here, because I think I felt really frustrated when we were going over the comp plan. I think and I think they did too. And so that was the purpose of the meeting. There was nothing intended to scold anyone. It was about how can we work together better. And I have had feedback from them. Perhaps I think there's been at least one of them who's brand new, that doesn't understand the history. So anyway, I think for the most part, I believe that it was very positive, and I do think that it will be helpful for all of us moving forward. And I thank you for requesting that. I think that is a great idea, especially with ADUs, and getting some of the feedback from them that they've already been through. I mean, I think they're tired of ADUs, and had we been working together, maybe we could have eliminated some of that frustration. But hopefully they will help us, and hopefully we'll be a help to them. So I thank you. I thank staff tonight for all the great work, and thank you all for the conversation. I greatly appreciate it. City Manager.
No report this evening.
City Attorney. We are adjourned.
Alison, do you have a few minutes?
Journal book?
Just like
Tuesday morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like $5. I love